This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning, it's 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's the same two stories really dominating attention this morning, and I think rightly so. On the other side of the Atlantic, the shooting of the influencer Charlie Kirk and some developments regarding the shooting suspect. And we may return to that a little later in the programme, but I don't know that I've got a great deal to add to what we had to say yesterday, except I suppose that we've moved into that really strange realm now where an awful lot of people who have insisted for years that you should be much more thick-skinned and less sensitive about what they like to call hurty words have suddenly decided that hurty words can be lethal. I don't know that I've got the skills needed to unravel that level of is it hypocrisy or just confusion, but it's probably worth noting. It's also worth noting that the unhappiness with Sir Keir Starmer over the Peter Mandelson story is not confined to what you might describe as the usual suspects or the traditional critics. Now, the left being what it is in this country, that doesn't just mean people on the right. The Judean People's Front, the People's Front of Judea, the factionalism within the Labour movement and on the entire left in this country is historically heartbreaking and absolutely visible from space. You put two Labour activists in... actually, I haven't got a very good joke here. I was trying to do a variation on the starting a fight in an empty room thing. You put your average left-winger is capable in this country, I don't know whether this includes me, of starting a fight in an empty room. You put three leftists in the same room in the United Kingdom and you will have three different parties or three different factions by lunchtime. But none of that changes the fact that the criticism this time round will be and is coming from people who would previously have been considered loyal. How many MPs do you think have left the government since the election, which was in July, if you need a little memory jog, of 2024? And I'll tell you what, this tinder is so dry. These attack lines are so potent that even Kemi Badenoch could score some palpable hits at PMQs on Wednesday. Would you be able to name them all? Would you be able to actually go back to the beginning and name all of them, let alone count all of them? I don't know that I could. I think the one that I would have forgotten would have been the one that was a resignation on principle. So if you gave me a bit of help, actually there's been two resignations on principle, hasn't there? So you've got Louise Haigh having a fraud offence in her background, pleading guilty to a fraud offence which she hadn't known about. She was sort of ordered to resign by Number 10 for a possible breach of the ministerial code. He didn't even bother referring that to his independent advisor. Then you had Tulip Sadiq, accused in another country of, if you like, corruption, and it was the allegations being brought particularly against her aunt, the ousted Prime Minister of Bangladesh, that were considered to be harming the government. So she didn't break any rules, according to an investigation, but she should have been more alive to the reputational risks. So she walked away, saying she would have been a distraction from the work of government. I don't think you can blame Keir Starmer for either of those. Do you? Then you've got Andrew Gwynn, suspended as from the party after it emerged that he had sent messages in which he said he hoped a pensioner who did not support him would die before the next set of elections. He'd also been racist and sexist about Angela Rayner and Diane Abbott, which probably would have got him a promotion in Boris Johnson's Tory party, but in Keir Starmer's Labour Party, it's hit the road time. And then you've got Annalise Dodds and Vicky Foxcroft, who resigned on points of principle, which still exist. The International Development Minister quit over the decision to halve the international aid budget to pay for an increase in spending on defence, and Vicky Foxcroft quit as a whip for because she couldn't support the government's welfare plans. She'd been a shadow disability minister before the general election. you've got to take your hat off to those two, whether you agree with their decision or not. Acting entirely on principle in the crucible of political ambition is an unfamiliar and admirable thing. Rushanara Ali, the homelessness minister, who she didn't actually make anybody homeless, but she left herself open to Kemi Badenoch telling that lie in the Commons on Wednesday. But she did, of course, tell people to move out of the home that she rented, or to stay there on notice that she was trying to sell it, and then when they left and she failed to sell it, it went back on the rental market at an increased price. Again, I don't think you can blame Keir Starmer for that, and I don't really think you can blame him for Angela Rayner failing to get the proper advice that she needed to purchase her home in Hove. How many homes do you think Angela Rayner owns? One. Funny that, isn't it? I don't know what nicknames popped up. I was actually on holiday for much of that saga, but I saw a couple. How many homes do you think Nigel Farage currently owns or has claimed to own? It's in a little bit of bother, but Farage being Farage, it won't stick. He'll slime his way out of it. How many homes do you think he either owns or has claimed to own, despite not owning? 5 homes Farage. We'll have a little chat later, or a little text vote later on what the best nickname would be. 5 homes, 5 gaffs, 5 garage Farage, or 5 piles. 5 piles. Nigel, 5 piles? 5 homes Farage, 5 gaffs Farage, or 5 garage Farage? Anyway, we digress. A little light relief. Because Starmer's got a problem. And politics is not... It's not a science. I mean, there is a science attached to politics. There is a political science. But politics, the relationship between the politics and the public is not a science. Perception is absolutely crucial. I heard some fascinating vox pops elsewhere this morning, which focused, one of them was really talking about charisma and how the departure of Angela Rayner had denied the front bench of charisma and of a good orator. And I thought, I'm a big fan of oratory, but I would have thought that we'd had enough of, quotes, charisma, end quotes, in this country. It kind of brought us Brexit, and it brought us Boris Johnson. I don't think anyone's ever accused Liz Truss of being charismatic, but she came in on the coattails of movements that sort of prioritised vibes and feelings over facts and expertise. But, you know, you've got to take that on board. It goes, doesn't it? It's the idea that you need someone. There's a great phrase that's knocking around at the moment. You've probably heard me use it as well, although I nicked it. So you need to tell a story. They haven't got a story to tell. And I think that accusation lands very heavily on Keir Starmer at the moment. I can't believe he has got himself into this mess, and it is incredibly early in his premiership for me to be asking you how much damage he has suffered from all of the things that we've just talked about, and then from the policy decisions, including the winter fuel debacle and others. But crucially, and I think uniquely, putting Peter Mandelson in the embassy in Washington when it was known that Mandelson had stayed friends with Jeffrey Epstein after his first child sex conviction. And to make things even worse, Mandelson's people are now briefing journalists that he told the Prime Minister that he'd continued his relationship with the financier for many years and deeply regretted doing so. I mean, I don't know if there's much point speculating on how this happened for too long, but I think we can allow ourselves a moment or two. I'm trying to imagine the conversation. And I mean, Mandelson is a brilliant communicator. He's an even better communications advisor, of course, although the firm that he set up with one of his former factotums is currently severing its ties. I think his share in the firm is up for sale. But he gets it. I've told you stories in the past that people have shared with me about the micromanagement of detail when it comes to presentation. So in that room with Keir Starmer, I imagine that he just kept hitting the regret button. I imagine that he made the whole conversation feel like an expression of regret. I did stay friends with him, but I regret it so much. I've regretted it so much since. And I can't quite get my head around how Starmer let that go. I honestly find myself today thinking, for the first time, that Keir Starmer just isn't very good at this stuff. I completely reserve the right to reverse ferret on this and to say that's more like it at some point in the future. But this story, more than any other, more than all the others, it just feels like such an easily avoidable mess. Do you remember what my friend Scott said about the Angela Rayner story? He said there is a requirement to ask at every turn whether or not this could possibly come back to bite you on the backside. And as a former director of public prosecutions who has done more than almost anybody else alive to address particularly the abuse of young women in this country, and indeed up to and including the so-called grooming gangs, how could he possibly not have thought that a deep and abiding association with a known paedophile after the first conviction had been secured would not come back to bite them all on the backside? I genuinely, it's one of those things that seems to me to get bigger the more you talk about it. Sometimes with this stuff, particularly because we're all sort of enthralled to right-wing media talking points in this country, and I do my best, of course, to break that cycle. But the more you talk about some stories, the smaller they sometimes feel. The Angela Rayner story, oddly, was much smaller than the headlines suggested. Big enough for a resignation, but for an honest mistake that was adjudged by the independent advisor on ministerial standards who described it as such. So there was no particular act of egregious idiocy or corruption. So the more you talked about that, the smaller the story got, even as you reached the point where you realised that her departure was probably inevitable and indeed necessary. And this story here, Lord Mandelson admitted in his vetting interview for the role of US ambassador that he continued his relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein for many years, allies said last night, as Sir Keir Starmer faced questions about his judgment from cabinet ministers. This seems to me to be huge. Is it? Does it look that way to you? I mean, of all the things that you're going to give a free pass to, or look the other way, or gamble won't come out, or gamble won't matter. Think about the way in which Epstein was dominating debate. Oddly enough, Charlie Kirk, I learned yesterday, was a huge advocate for the release of the Epstein papers. I think until Donald Trump got into the White House, an awful lot of Donald Trump allies absolutely adamant that the Epstein files or the Epstein story was being covered up and that Donald Trump would be the man to blow the lid off it. And then Donald Trump, one of Jeffrey Epstein's oldest and dearest friends, got into the White House, and suddenly some of them went quiet and some of them stuck to the story. So the idea that Keir Starmer thought this might go away, I just think this is. I think that's the line. Actually, we don't need to get hyperbolic about it, and we don't need to get personal even necessarily. Is this the point at which you think, do you know what? He might have been able to carry a Ming vase across an ice rink. One departure of a senior ally may be considered unfortunate, but two in a week, that's worse than careless. Is this the point at which you start wondering whether, or you start concluding that he's not actually very good at this? I mean, there is stuff that he is good at, but the bits you need to be good at to win elections or to sustain support of on the scale that he secured last July, he's not actually very good at. Or is it even worse than that? You're going to make an ambassadorial appointment despite known links to a known paedophile, and it already being known that he stayed at the financier's townhouse. He stayed at the paedophile's townhouse while the paedophile was in jail. Surely that is the point at which you conclude that this bloke has no business in your administration whatsoever. Anyway, I mean, there is another argument, but I thought I'd leave it to you to make that, which is that two things can be true at the same time. He has done a really, really good job as ambassador, and Starmer's gamble was that would outweigh the possibility of the problems that have popped up now. But that's the point, isn't it? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to tell me how big is this? And again, as with the Angela Rayner stuff, if you've hated Peter Mandelson and Keir Starmer since you were born, then your position, your opinion isn't going to be quite as interesting as the views and opinions of people who have been a little bit more open-minded. How big a problem is this? And do you think Starmer is now irreparably damaged? I can't believe I'm asking that question in September of 2025 when he only got into Downing Street in July of 2024. And I can't believe I'm asking it about someone who is demonstrably not corrupt in the way that Boris Johnson was, or ridiculous in the way that Liz Truss was, or dangerous in the way that Nigel Farage is. He's none of those things. But that doesn't mean he hasn't suffered irreparable damage. How big is this problem? And contingent, I suppose, upon your answer to that question, how damaged is he? Thoughtful answers only, please, on 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 10 is the time. This is from a comedian friend of mine, a genuine comedian, not a self-appointed comedian like Keith. He carried the vase across the ice rink and then handed it to a man in a mask and a stripy sweater with a bag labelled swag dangling over his shoulder. So, how badly damaged is Starmer? And in many ways, the Mandelson question, the Mandelson issue, is the first time you can ask how much of this is actually down to him. And in the case of Peter Mandelson's appointment, the answer has to be all of it. Nick's in Windsor. Nick, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James. Thank you for taking my call.
You're most welcome.
My belief is that Keir Starmer is now finished and there'll be a general election next year. And unfortunately...
A general election?
A general election next year, yeah.
Well, how does that work in terms of the size of the Labour majority?
So I think if they do change leader, which I think they will, I think Keir Starmer will be gone after the conference. I think his position is now...
Yeah, but how do you end up with a general election when you've got one of the biggest majorities in recent memory?
It's happened before. I think
when?
Richie Sunak spun the
he called an election.
Yeah. So if Keir Starmer goes,
yeah,
you're going to have a new prime minister, and then I think they will be forced through social discontent that's currently happening. That they'll be forced. They will be forced. Absolutely. Now, I don't want to see Nigel Farage become the next prime minister, but I think it's highly likely he will.
What sort of social discontent? What's going on in Windsor that I don't know about?
Well, I've got more flags in Windsor than I have in London at the moment, and some of them are the US flags.
There's always been a lot of flags in Windsor, but I mean, I see some mention of social discontent on social media, and I'm aware of these tiny protests outside buildings that have been repurposed as asylum seeker accommodation. But it's just not true, is it? I mean, how does that lead to a general election?
So I think the position of the UK will become so untenable that they'll have to. The budget's going to be a total disaster on the 28th of November because there's nothing been mentioned about wealth taxes. So we're going to be... So
you're buying into the social disorder, which if you turn out to be right, then I'll have a small slice of humble pie on the programme on that morning. But you're coming at it from a Starmer hasn't been left-wing enough position.
Yeah, you've got potentially 80 MPs that are ready to cross the aisle and join Jeremy Corbyn's party, or even
where does that number come from?
So it's a number I've heard many, many times.
Yeah, but where does it come from? Because you presume they can remember what happened last time he had a crack at running the Labour Party or running a political party.
But he got more votes than Keir Starmer did at the last election. He was also the single main reason given by people who voted for Boris Johnson for voting for Boris Johnson. So it doesn't work that. I've heard all of these arguments many, many times, and I don't want to sound dismissive. No, but none of that explains why whoever succeeds Keir Starmer would call a general election. I think they have to because when Keir Starmer came in, he said the adults are now in the room. The adults are in the room. Sorry, James, but
no, I'm chuckling at a text. Someone just messaged to say, "Was this chap asleep when the Tories were in power?" I don't know that whataboutery is the case, but in a nutshell, Keir Starmer hasn't been left-wing enough, and all of his MPs are going to join Jeremy Corbyn's party.
Correct. And also,
start the clock. Let's wait and see. I think that's a load of old hokum, but then again, as I've said, it may well be that you're phoning me up in. Should we put a clock on it next Christmas?
Sorry, I thought you cut me up there. Sorry, I didn't realise. So yeah, I think by March
of next year.
May the 7th.
May the 7th of next year, he'll have been replaced, and the new fellow would have called the general election. I mean, I'm tempted to say if that happens, I'll give you the money myself. But you never know. 25 minutes after 10 is the time. How much damage has been done to this administration by this leader? Not events, dear boy, events. Some of that you can't control. But the Mandelson story is the first time I've sat here thinking, and hey, look, everybody's guilty. Some of us sort of questioned it at the time, said that his track record, Mandelson's track record, wasn't exactly grounds for optimism. But the retrospective review of what happened, this bloke stayed friends with a paedophile, and we're going to make him ambassador. No one yet has gone down the road. I'm glancing at my screen. I think people will go down the road of saying why he had to in those circumstances. But I don't know that that's going to stand up to scrutiny today. Patrick's in Glasgow. Patrick, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Patrick.
I've spent the majority of the last 4 years or so thinking that Keir Starmer was I think quite like a lot of people who voted for him maybe for the first time or voted Labour last year. I'm a long-term Labour. I've been brought up to feel like, you know, public and taxation to spend for public services is a good thing. I up until maybe this I'm a bit like you. I think that this is something that will stick and is something that's so catastrophically badly managed by someone that does or did appear to be, the manager.
I think we're in very similar places. It's as if this is the sort of irrefutable evidence that being able to carry a Ming vase across an ice rink does not involve the same very specific set of skills that you need to do a good job when you've got the vase to safety. Managing. I don't want to diminish him because I do think deep down I think he's a decent chap and someone that has dragged Labour, you know, from the depths of despair into government. But managing the country, becoming Prime Minister, is very, very different. He did have the air of someone that and those first few weeks when he was appointing ministers, you thought, hang on, this is someone that knows what they do. The winter fuel payments. That's the first massive wobble. Was something that you said. They wasted so much political capital on something so. And even now, you look back and you think, how
what
could they have done that? There is an argument that with better communications they could have sold it to more people, but even then, thresholds and the number of people that were affected, it was quite an extraordinary act of self-harm. That, politically speaking, it really was. And those are the moments wherein you find yourself beginning to question the expedience theory, the pragmatist theory, the Ming vase theory. This one. Just to steer you back to it, but it can't be quite as clear-cut as we think it is. It was such an obviously stupid thing to do, we can't believe he did it, because he wouldn't have done such an obviously stupid thing to do. He must have thought that the benefits of having Mandelson in post outweighed the risks. Now, that might make him an idiot, but it's not a position that can be completely ignored, given, and we mention it for the first time this morning, who is actually in the White House.
Exactly. I think obviously when he was appointed, maybe the US election hadn't happened, so it was maybe an appointment that, look, it looks like Trump's going to come back in. Let's kind of, you know, it just beggars belief really now, and the links with this, the emails. I know Labour ministers were a lot of them were talking about that. It's dirty, it's sleazy, and one thing you can't throw at Mr. Starmer so far is sleaze or thing, but this it leaves an awful taste, and I have friends who are way more left wing than me, and when Keir Starmer was announced leader, I thought I had that kind of self-satisfied smug of thinking, you know. This might be the first step back for Labour. I grew up I was born in the late 80s. I grew up with a Blair government. I think, apart from Iraq, that Tony Blair was a good, you know, and Gordon Brown. This is damaging. This is so damaging, and I think, and I'm not someone that usually jumps to conclusions, but I think he has potentially one more one more kind of mistake in him, and then that's it. He's walking on eggshells now, and he is carrying the vase, and starting to wobble.
This is brilliant. Thank you so much, because you remind me that there comes a point when it doesn't matter what you do. I think Badenoch's crossed that point, actually, despite her very good performance this week at PMQs. It comes a point where it doesn't matter what you do, the damage is terminal. And I think you're right. I don't think he is actually quite there yet, but he's a hell of a lot closer than you or I thought he would be in September of 2025.
Yeah, and the worrying point for a lot of people who maybe lent Labour their vote last year or who are traditional Labour supporters is who there are very few people in that cabinet or backbench MPs that scream out leader, and I think a caller mentioned maybe before about charisma.
Yes.
Charisma was not an issue during the election campaign because a lot of people thought, well, he's okay. He's a safe pair of hands. We don't want politicians, mired in sleaze and scandal. This is, and it leaves.
That was the trade-off. That's another brilliant point. You're very good at this. Do call me again soon. Thank you, Patrick. Because that was the whole point about having someone dull in the post, is that you would avoid self-inflicted damage, generally, and specific examples of stupidity subjectively, and he hasn't. So what is the point of having a dull and uninspiring leader, regardless of what his skill set may be privately, if that doesn't deliver dull news cycles? Nothing to see here news cycles. What is the point of saying it doesn't? I don't want pizzazz and stardust and fireworks. I want a dull Prime Minister. I'm speaking personally now. This is James. I want a dull Prime Minister because I want a dull news agenda. I want a dull country. I want a nice, happy country where things aren't blowing up all the time, either metaphorically or literally. What is the point of having a dull Prime Minister if the news cycle is still febrile? I don't know, maybe that makes me sound silly or naive, but I hope not. Here's Thomas Watts with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
35 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, it is unhelpful that Peter Mandelson's, quotes, allies, end quotes, are briefing the Times this morning about how unhappy he is because he told Keir Starmer that he stayed friends with a paedophile after the paedophile was convicted. But, for a man who's supposed to be a master of the dark arts or a genius, you'd have thought, what would he have said? What do you think Peter Mandelson, the spin doctor, would have said to Keir Starmer if Keir Starmer had said, I'm thinking of appointing a bloke to Washington, to our man in Washington, our ambassador in Washington, who stayed friends with a paedophile after the paedophile had been convicted. In fact, not only that, he stayed in the paedophile's house while the paedophile was in jail. What do you think Peter Mandelson would have said to Keir Starmer if he had sought his advice? To which the only even vaguely charitable answer you can conjure up is, well, it depends who's in the White House, boss. And then you've got the other problem that is entirely self-inflicted. I said to you on Wednesday, it sounded to me like his heart wasn't in it, which is not to take anything away from Kemi Badenoch's excellent performance. It was an A plus, I think, possibly an A plus performance. Albeit it went a bit raggedy at the end. It didn't matter by then. I think she'd already got enough points in the pot to secure an A star or an A plus. You can't have it both ways. So there was an interview knocking about that morning wherein Peter Mandelson said that there was more stuff to come. Keir Starmer defended him at PMQs, and then when they fired him the next day, he said it was because more stuff came out. So again, this is not Ming Va's stuff, is it? Here's a bloke that people are telling you to fire. What's he said today? Oh, he said there's more stuff to come out. It's really embarrassing. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to defend him robustly at PMQs, even if it sounds as if my heart isn't in it. The words will be what are remembered, not the tone or the mien. And then I'm going to fire him the next day. Oh, okay. And what grounds are you going to give for firing? Oh, well, some more stuff came out. But you'd been told more stuff was going to come out when you stood up at PMQs and defended him. This is not good. And I think that our last caller was probably on the money when he said there's room for probably one more. But what I meant about politics not being a science was that when you reach a certain point, it doesn't matter how much of the wounds you are suffering from It doesn't matter how many of them were self-inflicted. There comes a point when you're so wounded that you can't fight on. Some of them will be self-inflicted. This one is. For my money, this one is entirely self-inflicted. Some of them will not be. For my money, the Angela Rayner one was not self-inflicted, nor really was the Louise Haigh one. In fact, none of them were really self-inflicted until Mandelson. But they're still wounds. You know, what metaphor do you prefer? The wounded warrior or the straw that broke the camel's back? The back is not broken, but the biggest straw he put there himself, I think. Tell me why I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. Miss Yalua is here in Colindale, it says here, not Fulham. What would you like to say?
I'm at my fiancé, so
Isn't that outrageous? I presume there's only one person with your name that would ever call me, and the fact that you normally call me from Fulham means that you have now moved, rather than that there are two people with your name who may be listening to the programme. Anyway, what would you like to say? And congratulations on your engagement.
Oh, thank you very much. My point is the point that you just made, kind of, and also the point that you made before. I think you really have to consider whose court he was going to, or whose king he was going to serve. I don't think Keir Starmer is crazy. I personally don't like him at this point. I voted for him, still don't like him. But I don't think that if it was anybody else and if it was any other country, he would have made this decision. He's not crazy. He was DPP. He knows what's right. He knows what's wrong. He knows what honesty is. He knows what integrity is. He knows how to do the right thing when he needs to. So you have to kind of think that for you to choose Peter Mandelson and know what you knew, you really had to have had your back up against the wall, or you really had to have felt that in order for me to send somebody to this country, I have to send somebody who kind of knows the person that they're going to meet most of the time. I have to think that you have to be as oily as the person who rules the country. You have to be.
So if Bellatrix Lestrange is in the Ministry of Magic, then we need Snape to be our representative.
Yeah, you can't send Lupin. You can't send Lupin. You cannot send Lupin.
So two things can be true. Two things can be true at the same time. Then Douglas Alexander this morning can be correct when he says that Peter Mandelson did a bang-up job and was probably the only person that could do it. And whoever was doing the rounds yesterday, Mike somebody, can also be correct when he said these emails turn my stomach, or these emails are absolutely outrageous.
Oh, no, they're disgusting. They're absolutely disgusting. But I think also Keir Starmer felt that I need somebody who could kind of understand him. But then again, that also begs the question of who do you actually work for, them or us? Who do you work for? Do you
mean the ambassador?
Yes. Like if you're putting that man as close to the White House, do you think that that's going to work at home? Because, like you said, the day before you're saying, "Oh yeah, I'm supporting him. It's fine." The day after, new stuff has come up, but you knew.
Well, you didn't know exactly what it was going to be. I think the world of you. I mean, it was these were almost like Hallmark cards. These
it's
are not.
The stuff you write to your wife. It's actually the stuff you write to your wife.
Yes, it is. Although my wife's never going to get into this sort of bother. I think the world of you, and I feel hopeless and furious about what has happened. Your friends stay with you and love you. This is after he's been convicted. It is. I mean, it is actually weird. But it's also weird. Deeply, deeply damaging and impossible. So I suppose, again, to speculate, Starmer would have thought, oh, blimey, there's more to come. But it'll be very much of the same flavour. It'll be stuff of the same flavour as what has gone before. And then we turn up with full rum and raisin. And he couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't know how, what's the word, weird, to use your word, or embarrassing, or hallmarky it was going to be.
Yeah, he didn't know, but I'd like to think Peter Mandelson would have had the God-given sense to actually be open the day before and say, look, this is what's coming. Because he did say it. He said more stuff is coming. So you'd hope that he'd say, this is what's coming.
Yeah, and but he's always had this extraordinary ability to manage every career except his own. He took the job and he knew this stuff was in there. If it was, I often think about what, I've already said it today, what advice would he give to somebody in his own situation? And I think his advice would have been, you can't take this job because it's going to come out. And also look how big Epstein is in the presidential campaign, in Trump land, in MAGA land. Look how big Epstein is. So your point becomes not self-defeating, but circular. We have to send someone who's got this kind of background because he's going to be dealing with Trump, who's also a great old mate of the paedophile. But the idea that the closeness of Mandelson to the paedophile won't come out when the story of the paedophile is such big news and remains such enormous news in the United States of America. I mean, I like your analysis, and I can't argue with it, except for that observation that we're doing cognitive dissonance, two things being true at the same time. It was good. It was a brilliant appointment and an appalling appointment at the same time. But how much damage has it done him?
Oh, so much. So I can't vote for him.
It just has, hasn't it? You can't vote for him. Well, it depends. Surely depends what the alternatives are.
I hate to say this because as a politics student it makes me sick. I would rather just not vote.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll come back to you in time for the next general election and give you a bit of a rocket on why that is an absolutely reprehensible position to adopt. But at this point in time, I can't really argue with it. And quite a lot of you are getting in touch and saying that you hate the way you're feeling because all the things you'd normally reach for at a moment like this don't work. You say, oh, come off it, the right-wing media just won't leave him alone. This has nothing to do with the right-wing media. Oh, Boris Johnson got off on all sorts of things. Yes, I know he did, but it doesn't change the reality of what has happened here. Why do you think he did it? Answer, because Donald Trump was going to be in the White House 2 months later. Is that a big enough reason to excuse the stuff that he already knew? That's the problem. It's all very well changing your mind when the facts change, but the stuff that he already knew, it struck me yesterday, should have been an absolute game ender. And it wasn't. And I don't really know why. It's coming up to 11:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. How damaged is he? I've reached an unfortunate point in my career where I'm now and this isn't me being self-referential or boastful, quite the opposite actually, it can sometimes be quite exhausting, but I now say things that get reported elsewhere. I said something about Angela Rayner the other day and it got picked up on that dreadful website that used to be run by the serial drunk driver before he got sort of chased into oblivion by Dale Vince. So, I don't want to say I don't think Keir Starmer will be in post for the next general election. Andy Burnham's on manoeuvres, and I don't quite think it yet. But I'm amazed how close I am to it. So far out from the next general election.
James O'Brien on LBC.
47 is the time. I'm just going to quote one of my favourite political commentators, if I may. Before this river becomes an ocean, before you throw my heart back on the floor, oh baby, I reconsider my foolish notion. Well, I need someone to hold me, but I'll wait for something more. Yes, I got to have faith. Ooh, I got to have faith. Because I got to have faith. I got to have faith. Faith. Said the late, great George Michael. And that, I think, is why some people are... some people are cross with me today, but there's always some people who are cross with me. And some people are sharing in my sense of, I think sadness is a bit strong. You just want someone you can have faith in, and my faith in Keir Starmer is wobbling. And not because he's lied or because he's lied, not because he's lied again, not because he set fire to the economy, not because he appears to be sort of depraved in both public and personal life, not because his home became the address at which more COVID rules were broken than any other address in the United Kingdom, not because he's hired a psychopath who will lie to your face about why he drove his car halfway round the north of England during lockdown. None of those reasons. And it's not whataboutery to remember what he represented a change from, but you just want to have faith. And now Andy Burnham is on manoeuvres, the King of the North. He has set up a new group and warned that Sir Keir Starmer's narrow and brittle political project risks breaking his party. So what if Andy Burnham tilts for the top job? It'd be very, very tricky, given that he hasn't got a seat in Parliament. But would you have faith in him after he led an appalling leadership campaign last time he tried to get the top job? I mean, that's the thing. You just want to have a little bit of faith. This is why it must be nice to be a fan of a populist. You've just decided that they've got your 100% loyalty and I will always love them and I'm going to stick a flag in my front window because I love them so much and it doesn't matter what they do. Doesn't matter if they dodge stamp duty and lie about it and claim that they bought a house when they hadn't. It doesn't matter if they sue a woman for libel after she accuses them of rape and then loses the case. It's an extraordinary situation to find yourself in. None of that matters because he's my man and I'm sticking with him. But, of course, if you've got a brain, or at least you know how to use it, and you want to have faith in a leader, you owe it yourself to be honest when that faith begins to wobble. And this, for me, this Mandelson story, I'd love you to tell me, and there's still time, why I'm overreacting, but I don't think I am. And if the argument is going to be the one that Imi Salua made, that it's all about who was in the White House, which is obviously true, but it's not currently feeling like a big enough argument to excuse the egregiousness of the original appointment. It's almost the only thing that's making me think it might not be as bad as I think it is that it's so obvious how bad it was that I think I might be missing something, which I think is the sound of a man tying himself in knots live on the radio. David's in Eastbourne. David, what would you like to say?
I think I agree with you, but I think I'm disappointed in Starmer because he sacked him, not because he employed him.
Well, you don't agree with me then. We're coming at this from fascinatingly different angles, albeit that we might end up in the same place.
Yeah, I think so. Because he employed him, and whilst he probably knew that Epstein was involved somehow, so was Trump involved in Epstein.
Yes.
And he thought, well, Mandelson's a gay man. He can't be, whatever he is involved, he can't be as bad as possibility of whatever Trump may or may not have been involved in. But now it looks like, whilst one of Epstein's friends has been sacked, the other one's got a state visit. And also, the whole, yes, he associated with him after his conviction.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Doesn't sound good. But David Davis thinks Lucy Letby's innocent. She's in jail. It's like he should have just.
I think that is whataboutery. And also I'm not 100% sure that I've seen that claim from David Davis, who I've managed to forget about in recent years. So thanks a bunch for reminding me of his existence. That's a great start to the flipping weekend. That is. Lord above. No, exactly. Such a bang-up job he did there. Who wouldn't pay enormous attention to whatever his latest opinions may be? But this is the Prime Minister appointing the ambassador, and I think the problem I've got, one of the many problems I've got, is the notion of the trade-off. It's like, well, all right, he stayed mates with a paedophile, but this Donald Trump job is huge, and therefore I'm going to set one against the other. I don't know. Everything I thought I knew about Keir Starmer would balk at the idea of. And you're right. He probably thought
whatever. He's just a friendship. He's not done anything illegal. He won't have actually been involved in with young girls or anything like that because he's a gay man.
Yes.
I think Starmer thought for the country this is the best man for this very, very important job at this very important time with this particular.
I think that's true. I don't share your ability to see that as a big enough bonus to justify the the holding of the nose over the other stuff. And I think I know what happened. I think Epstein's story was that he wasn't quite stitched up, but that it was a technicality, and he obviously had never done any of the bigger things he was accused of, as was proved by the fact that he was only convicted of the comparatively smaller crime, and therefore it's proof. And one of the things Mandel said was it could never have happened in this country. So he had bought the lies of Epstein, hook, line and sinker. He'd bought the lies hook, line and sinker. And whether or not he somehow managed to sell his credulity to Keir Starmer as being forgivable, I guess we'll never know. But I don't think it's it's a mistake to sack him. I don't see that he had any choice. Let me read you this again. Ready?
Yeah.
This is when he pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution from minors, okay? When he pleaded guilty. I think the world of you, and I feel hopeless and furious about what has happened. Your friends stay with you and love you.
I wasn't aware of that nuance. He, having pleaded guilty, wrote that.
Yeah,
Are you sure?
Yeah.
He wasn't denying it.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
This is live radio.
Slightly more tricky.
This is live radio, folks. and that is what emerged yesterday. You see, and that emerged after he had said in an interview that more stuff was going to emerge, and Starmer had took the view that it wouldn't be as bad as all that.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, Starmer didn't know about that.
No, he didn't.
Until yesterday, did he? So
you didn't know about it until 2 minutes ago, so we can extend forgiveness to Starmer. And as soon as he did know about it, he sacked him. And now, in the course of this phone call, I think you have reviewed your position that he made a mistake by sacking him.
Yeah.
He had to go on that. I mean, for some, I think Emmy put it best, didn't she? It's the kind of stuff you send to your wife or your lover, not to your friend, your paedophile friend. Your friends stay with you and love you. It's just deeply weird. And once again, the idea that he's brilliant at managing careers of anybody except Peter Mandelson is brilliant at managing the political careers of everybody except Peter Mandelson, although he has not done Keir Starmer any favours here, any more than he did previous Prime Minister's favours when he was forced to resign from their governments for other misdemeanours and indiscretions. Thank you for that, David. I love the sound of a mind changing in real time. I love it even more when it's my mind, but that hasn't happened yet today. Neil is in Nottingham. Neil, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Well done. You got there in the end, Neil.
I got there in the end, yeah. One of my points was the one I think that's been discussed quite a lot, which is really, I guess I'd summarise by saying, through his own miscalculations, he's made the mistake that a lot of people have done. He's been too close to the orbit of Trump.
Yes.
But ironically, I think one of the reasons for that, as well as the ones you've already discussed, is that ultimately he has a lack of confidence, if you like, coming back to this issue of the bigger vision, what he's about, what he's trying to achieve. And I think that has played through to his sort of technological, let's call it, risk management. But that takes me, in fact, to my main point, which is that I think with Keir Starmer, what we've seen is almost a classic case. And it's very understandable, but it's like somebody who is, let's say, and I'll use the analogy because we all know Keir's father was a toolmaker, but somebody who is very good on the tools, very good technically at their job or aspects of that side of their job, and then that is taken as almost evidence that they are going to be good at being the supervisor of the tool shop. So Keir Starmer's undoubtedly got a lot of, analytical skills, the sort of skills that have served him well in his career path to date. But what he hasn't got is the political nous and the communication skills, which are far more important for the role that he's got. So he's been relying on, I guess, his past skill set, and that really hasn't served him well. And this Mandelson example is probably, as you say, the most egregious and the one that we can tie down to his own miscalculations. But there's been a lot of them along the way, and I think that's what we're seeing, a increasing process of somebody who is good at one part of the job, but unfortunately is not good at the part that's required, which is the communication, which is the having the
Everyone will recognise this. Everyone will recognise what you're describing, whether it's a brilliant footballer who's rubbish at management, or whether it's someone good on the tools who can't run the workshop. It's and you know what I think. If he were listening, and I hope he isn't, because he's got much more important fish to fry at the moment, but if he was listening, do you know what I think would worry them the most? The inner circle, the key consiglieres, is how mournful you sound. This isn't one of those phone-ins where people are ringing in to vent spleen at their bête noires or to indulge in well-established vendetta or to resharpen ancient knives and ancient feuds. This is that you sound very regretful, rueful and mournful as you arrive at a place of recognition.
But I think it's also because it's a place that I sort of recognise. I mean, for what it's worth, I think that fundamentally Keir Starmer on lots of levels is a pretty decent bloke.
So do I.
And also for what it's worth, I voted for him because he was the best of the alternatives. But, I can see mistakes in him that I've made myself, and I'm not trying to put myself in the same category. But, I mean, at one part in my life, and I'm a bit older than Keir Starmer, I was very good professionally at my job, but I was a rubbish manager. And if I went back and did it again now, one of the things I'd do very differently is I'd forget about the technicalities and I'd focus on the communication, the leadership, the people skills. And those are the ones that, unfortunately, he's missing. And unfortunately, he's missing them in a rabid environment of social media where the sort of stuff that you and I will see online about Keir Starmer day to day is bleeding out into the wider conversation as well.
And these are liars and agitators and provocateurs spreading absolute nonsense about him. But that is also something that his skill set should be at least accommodating or addressing. Even, you know, I mean, the fact that the government stays on Twitter and doesn't actually use pretty much any other outlets to get its announcements out there when Twitter has turned into a far-right sewer is another massive misstep. And I read the other day they haven't reviewed their policy since the end of 2024 or something like that, or the middle of last year. It's madness, an awful lot of the stuff that's going on. And the buck has to stop somewhere, doesn't it? And that is the point you're making, really, is there's nowhere else it can stop. And the worse it gets...
And I think a lot of that also does come back to this lack of clarity ultimately about what he and Labour are about. It's not enough to just, in effect, you know, want to do things better, to make things work again. That's just not enough, and it's certainly not enough to counter any of that.
If you can see the destination, you can forgive the odd puncture and even live with the odd bump in the road. But if you've no idea what the destination is, you start wondering what the hell you're doing in the car.
People generally, I think, are more forgiving of somebody who is fighting for something concrete, even if they disagree with what they're fighting for. They'll attach more importance and more credibility to somebody who is fighting for something rather than somebody who appears to be wishy-washy and doesn't have an end destination in mind.
Yeah, and then we're back to dullness, because although I welcome dullness, I embrace dullness, if that's all you're offering is dullness and you're not delivering it, dullness isn't really a destination. Dullness is a tactic that you use to reach your destination. And again, Neil has nailed so much there so neatly that you kind of find yourself wondering what will be next. I think the abiding takeaway from this hour will probably be the idea of it's like a cat who's lost 8 lives. And I wonder what the 9th will prove to be. It's 11:01.
James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 11 is the time. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I could happily continue it. But of course, we are probably years out from any general election, and the travails of Keir Starmer will no doubt. We will no doubt dedicate more time to them in the coming days, in the coming months, even years. So we return to that hideous killing in America. 2 things that we picked up on yesterday. I think one of these problems was solved. I began yesterday's programme not really having a very clear idea of who Charlie Kirk was, or indeed what he stood for. And I ended it with a much clearer idea, which it is not quite as straightforward a process as you might think. I got a few messages yesterday complaining that we were playing out clips of what the chap actually said, the self-styled free speech champion. And then I bumped into Ian Dale yesterday evening, and he said, "Oh, you're getting a lot of flack on Twitter." And I said, "Well, what on earth have I done now?" And he said, "Oh, people think that you were wrong to play out clips of Charlie Kirk talking." I'm like, how can anybody be cross that you're playing out? I mean, what would he want in the aftermath of his appalling murder? Would he want his positions, his arguments, his messages to be more widely disseminated than ever before? Or would he want people to essentially censor him posthumously? How can it possibly be... I don't know. I gave up trying to work out what passes for the logic in the minds of these kind of people a long time ago. It's not true, is it? I'll never give up trying to work it out. But I gave up much hope that I would ever succeed. And the other bit that was missing from the analysis, from the entire story, was the definition of who they were. So Donald Trump moved immediately, as Donald Trump will always do, to turn this tragedy into whatever would be most to the benefit of Donald Trump. And so he elected to list attacks upon Republican politicians, refer to attacks upon Republican politicians, and completely ignore attacks upon Democrat politicians, many of which have been undertaken by people who were proven to be Donald Trump supporters or Donald Trump admirers, and talked about radical left rhetoric. I heard a lot of talk, I've seen a lot of talk about they. I'll play you a clip in a moment of a Fox News commentator saying they're at war with us. And I genuinely don't know who they are. And obviously there's a frisson of
concern, not necessarily fear, that it just means anybody who keeps telling the truth about these people and this movement. Anybody who, for example, considers it absolutely unconscionable that you could pardon insurrectionists who attacked the Capitol and left left the police officers traumatised, terrified, and even dead. You know, is that what he means? What is the radical left rhetoric? So there were two things missing from our conversation yesterday. And I answered one of those questions. I now know what he stood for. I don't remove, and I appreciate some people have been less empathetic than me, if you like. But I don't resile a single scintilla of sympathy and horror at what happened to the guy. I used the word courageous yesterday to describe my reaction to the discovery that he always debated people. I don't know that I would reuse that word today, because I've had a look at some of the clips, I've had a look at some of the debates, and I don't really know how courageous it was. I've also seen quite a lot of clips of him losing, but the criticisms he received. But I'll tell you why I say that, because I don't think I'm courageous. And what he did essentially was what I do from a very different political position and not on the radio. So if I get the better of somebody, there'll be a long queue of people claiming that I've been condescending or I've bullied them, or you can't really edit things to make me look better than I actually am, because the whole flipping show is up on YouTube from beginning to end. But I don't want to be yin to his yang, and I'm obviously nowhere near as important on the political stage on either side of the Atlantic. But I don't know that it's courageous to say, prove me wrong. I just used the word to describe him in contrast to a lot of people who seem to have similar politics and will never stand up and be counted. So in relative terms, he had more courage than Hank Buncher-Numbers with a bald eagle avatar who spends his life disseminating negativity and bigotry on social media. And I didn't like what I discovered about him. And the more I discovered about him during yesterday's programme, the more troubled I was by the response, particularly of Boris Johnson, actually, who talked about all he ever did was say common sense things. And then you read some of the things that he'd actually said, or you listened to some of the things that he'd actually said, and you wondered whether Boris Johnson, the nicest thing you could say about Boris Johnson was that he didn't know. He should have listened to yesterday's show, because he was responding. And that, of course, is when I realised why people would get so cross about anybody reading out what he'd said or playing out actual footage of him talking. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine casting yourself as a disciple of somebody you describe as a free speech champion, and then he tragically gets murdered by persons as yet unknown, which is an element of the conversation that we're moving towards. He tragically gets murdered, and all of the people who consider themselves to be disciples of a free speech champion have hissy fits and conniptions over the words that he spoke, over people playing the words that he spoke. I'm not often completely baffled by bigotry, but I've got to tell you, that one's got me right in the confused zone of my brain. So you don't want me to find out what he stood for, even as I condemn his murder? Why don't you want me to find out why don't you want people to know what he stood for? Surely that's a grave disservice to his memory. You think he'd be ashamed of the things that he was recorded saying? You think he'd be ashamed of the positions he adopted? You think he'd be ashamed of the arguments that he made? Or are you ashamed of the fact that you agree with them and therefore you don't want anybody holding up the mirror? As usual, generally when I'm completely baffled by people, I realise it is what they see in the mirror that's being held up that they're repelled by, rather than the person actually holding up the mirror. That just becomes a wonderful exercise in projection. So I'm categorically not praising the man, but I am discovering with every passing hour the reality of his opinions. And that then takes us to the reaction. And
I've seen actually one right-winger. I'm not familiar with him. I'm not that plugged into American politics. And I don't know whether he's ignorant of history or whether he's absolutely stupid, but I've seen one right-wing commentator this morning suggesting that this is like the Reichstag fire in Nazi Germany. The Reichstag fire, if you don't know, involved the German parliament building being set on fire by one individual who was a Dutch communist. And Hitler used it to claim that this was all part of a massive conspiracy by all the communists, because 1930s Germany could have gone either way. It could have gone far left or far right. And Hitler knew that. The biggest threat to him politically was probably from communists. And he therefore lied about it being a massive conspiracy of people, and that they had to round up all the communists. And once they started rounding up the communists and closing down democracy and co-opting the judiciary, you know what happened next. So I was a little surprised to see that point being made by somebody who would very much style themselves as on the same side of politics as Donald Trump or indeed Charlie Kirk. I didn't know Charlie Kirk was one of the people that lied about the 2020 election. So, again, you know, I don't know what his position was on the insurrectionists, but pardoning people who've tried to overthrow democracy by using political violence is surely, under any analysis whatsoever, more of a catalyst for political violence than calling people names. And then I've also found myself in the last 24 hours reading people who used to claim that calling people names is just hurty words. Even Farage is in the Daily Mail today complaining about people being called names. And yet these are the guys who 10 minutes ago were telling us that our free speech was under that. I mean, I'm just really confused. Until you start wondering whether it is, as always, all about the race. As is often the way, the transgender people being used as camouflage in the first instance to go all in on the racism. Allowing public discourse to be vile again in the context of transgender people. You're never going to get that genie back in the bottle, and all of the people whose bigotries extend far beyond one issue have been filling their boots ever since. I want you to listen to something. First of all, I want you to listen to this. This is a political commentator from the Republican Party. I think he used to work for George Bush. He definitely worked for one of the George Bushes. I just can't completely remember which one. This guy got sacked.
He's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions.
That is a guy called Matthew Dowd speaking on MSNBC. He got fired for those words shortly afterwards. This is a guy called Jesse Waters speaking on Fox News in more or less the same window of time, and both in response to this horrible murder.
Trump gets hit in the ear. Charlie gets shot dead. They came after Kavanaugh with a rifle to his neighborhood. They went after Musk's cars. They just shot 2 Jews outside the embassy. Think about it. Scalise got shot, barely survived. It's happening. We got trans shooters. We got riots in LA. They are at war with us. Whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us. And what are we going to do about it? How much political violence are we going to tolerate? And that's the question we're just going to have to ask ourselves. Mm-hmm. Now, Charlie would want us to put as much pressure on these people as possible. Dana nailed it. This is unacceptable and has to stop. And it has to stop now. And everybody's accountable. And we're watching what they're saying on television and who's saying what. The politicians, and the media, and all of these rats out there. This can never happen again. It ends now. Greg's right again. This is a turning point, and we know which direction we're going.
He's still got a job. And, you know, I share his condemnation of political violence, but who are they? Who is this homogenous group of people that are all responsible for the actions of those individuals? I mean, he did actually go further.
We're angry and we're resolute, and we're going to avenge Charlie's death in the way Charlie would want it to be avenged.
Are you talking about avenging now? And how can you be opposed to political violence but supportive of a man who pardoned the January the 6th insurrectionists? You remember that footage, you saw it, you watched it. Donald Trump lost an election and his
supporters attacked the Capitol and attacked the public servants working there and bayed for the blood of the actual vice president. I still don't know enough about Charlie Kirk to know how he would feel about the coverage of his murder. But I mean, I'm certain that he wouldn't want people to be complaining about hearing his words being repeated and disseminated. And I don't know. I mean, listen, if you're going to... You talk about all of the people that Waters guy just talked about, and it's right to do so, but you then have to talk about Melissa Hortman and her husband, targeted in their homes, killed by a Trump supporter. That's a matter of record. The man charged with the attempted assassination of Pennsylvania's Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro in April, a Trump supporter. 4 Democratic elected officials targeted in New Mexico in 2022. The man who tried to kidnap the Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and actually assaulted her husband Paul. That's something that Donald Trump Jr. made jokes about. Imagine if someone was making jokes, someone in public life, a really senior Democrat, was making jokes about Charlie Kirk's murder now. What do you think would happen to them? But Donald Trump's son made jokes about attempted kidnap and attack upon senior Democrats. Everybody who wanted to hang Mike Pence on January the 6th, 2021 was a Trump supporter. By definition, if you were there, you weren't just a Trump supporter, you were also spreading lies, buying lies, disseminating lies, or, to be generous, believing lies. And the list goes on. And the list should be married to the other list. They should all be on the same list. Gabby Giffords shot in the head, a Democrat. We speak about they, all of these Democrats. Is there some unidentified homogenous group, the radical left? Who are you talking about? People who support political violence. There are 2 types of people. People who support political violence and people who don't. Actually, there are 3 types of people. There are people who undertake political violence, and they are the worst. All right? Then there are the people who support political violence, and they are the second worst. And then there are the people who abhor and condemn political violence, and they are all of us. Why is that suddenly complicated in the context of this story? Why is it suddenly tribal? Why is it political or footballified? Here are the people who undertake political violence, up to and including whoever turns out to have shot Charlie Kirk and all of the people, for example, who attacked the Capitol in 2021. Here are the people who support political violence, whoever is doing it. And here are the people who don't. That's a scary division, right? That's a really scary division. Because you kind of end up being told, in this context, in this sort of crucible of very carefully cultivated hatred, that anybody who disagrees with you is responsible for the political violence enacted against the people who agree with you. Anybody who disagrees with you, it's a bit like what they tried to do with the Palestinian peace marches. If you're protesting, if you're demonstrating solidarity with innocent people being killed in Gaza, then you must support Hamas. If you disagree with Donald Trump, then you must support the people who tried to kill him. If you disagree with some of the racist conspiracy theories that Charlie Kirk adhered to, notably the Great Replacement theory, if you disagree with that, then you must somehow endorse his murder. I mean, is that what they're saying? Is that what it is? Is it actually a lot simpler than it originally looks? It's all about controlling the narrative, and the narrative is that everybody who disagrees with us, just as we saw with the Reichstag fire, everybody who disagrees with us deserves the violence that we are pretending to condemn and abhor. I genuinely don't know. How much trouble is America in? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. How much trouble is America in as a consequence of the reactions to this horrible murder, the reactions from the president, that the fact that the bloke who sounded relatively thoughtful just got fired by US media, and the bloke calling for vengeance has still got a job? What have you learned from the events of the last 24 hours? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 11:22.
James O'Brien on LBC.
24 minutes after 11. What have you learned in the last 24 hours with regard to the reactions to the killing of Charlie Kirk by somebody who is yet to be identified? Again, what do you do if you're a Donald Trump supporter? And you know somewhere inside that the fact that he's filleted the FBI and put a man who is, I think, objectively an idiot in charge of it is probably going to have some impact upon the effectiveness of the investigation. It may well already have done so. But you can't say that because it's a cult. And the cult is being, well, what? Prepared, primed to attack everybody now who doesn't agree with the cult or who stands up to the cult on the grounds that individual acts of violence undertaken by despicable people are proof. Again, it takes us back to the hotel protests. It's one crime, whether it actually happened or not, committed by one person, is proof that thousands of people with a shared characteristic or a shared biographical detail or a shared ethnicity, they must all be guilty and they must all be the enemy. Imagine if a Democrat, a senior Democrat, or a senior politician who wasn't part of the Trump bandwagon came out and tried to claim that Donald Trump was responsible, personally responsible for every single attack undertaken on politicians by a Donald Trump fan. Imagine what the reaction would be, and yet when the boot is on the other foot, they can't get enough of it. It's really strange and quite scary. And I guess it's a lazy question, but how scary is it? Mark Riley, and I'll use your surname on this occasion, Mark. So you phoned me a few times, but you are a veteran of the US media now, for romantic reasons, now settled in Brighton. But you you know of what you speak. So tell me why you picked up the phone today. What's going on here?
To let people know a few things. One, Charlie Kirk and Jesse Waters and all the rest of these people who are commentators on the American body politic are word pimps. That's what they do. That's how they got rich. That's how they move forward. Charlie Kirk, who died at the age of 31, was busy arguing with college kids. That's how he made his money. And people need to understand that. He wasn't debating, by and large, was not debating people of his own age or even of his own intellect. He was debating kids. And he said some really, really despicable things. Ask yourself this, James.
You and I find them despicable, but people who find them wonderful are really cross if we play them out, which is another odd element of this entire conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you kind of have to sort of expect that. It's like, do as I say, not as I do.
Okay.
Look, Charlie Kirk was born in 1993. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. What do you think Charlie Kirk knew about Martin Luther King? To call him a despicable human being, or to say that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a mistake. The man was born in 93, and he's talking about an act that was passed in 1964. He was a word pimp. He had no real experience about a lot of the stuff he talked trash about.
You don't sound as if you're as worried as I could be about what this might presage.
No, I mean, look, we've seen in America an attack on the capital of the country. Now, that's the political and spiritual seat of the United States of America. And people attacked it, and not only were they pardoned, some of them are lionized, and Donald Trump, with a straight face, talked about having a parade for one woman who was killed during it.
And I'm hearing condemnations of political violence from his supporters. I mean, it's... I suppose it's a mistake to look for logic here, Mark, and that's the curse, isn't it, really? You're trying to find a rational explanation, but there can't be a rational explanation for somebody pardoning insurrectionists and complaining about political violence. It's not a rational approach.
Of course not, and they don't complain about violence when it comes to children. The leading cause of death for children under the age of 14 in America is gun violence. Do people want to try and talk about that in the context of Charlie Kirk? Do people want to say that, for example, Sandy Hook, which was decried as a hoax by some of these same fellow travelers, does somebody want to say that that has something to do with Charlie Kirk? I mean, they use guns in both cases.
And again, he'd spoken about how some deaths were the price you pay for the necessity of the Second Amendment.
Of the Second Amendment.
But doesn't it? I mean, the more you talk, the more it mounts up. It's imagine a wall. I don't know what the wall is. Decorum or democracy or decency. And the more stuff you're piling against that wall, surely the more likely it is that the wall will fall.
It is more likely, but right now, America's in the middle of one of the most bizarre periods of its history. And that history started when Donald Trump went down the escalator and decided he was going to run for president. What was that, 2015? Mm. And now we're 10 years later, a full decade later. And the man, and by the way, I don't know if you've discussed it yet, but have you taken a look at the picture that he took yesterday with his mouth all drooping on one side?
I did see that. I don't want to read too much into it because I was uncomfortable when people speculated too much on Biden's health. But actually, in retrospect, that was probably a mistake. But he does look very odd at the moment.
Yeah, he does. And I mean, look, I can't, I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about the man's health. Everybody, who was it? Carolyn Levitt says he's in great shape. Fine. Okay. But if you listen to what he says, never mind the drooping mouth. Listen to what he says. He repeats the same thing over and over and over again. And seems to have no clue that he's doing it.
Yes, and certainly the scrutiny that was applied to Joe Biden is not being applied to Donald Trump. But let's look at what he said yesterday. It's extraordinary, really. The media need to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year. So he's now subscribing to the idea that there should be limits on free speech, having spent much of the last year insisting that there shouldn't be any and that we have a particular problem with it over here in the most hateful and despicable way possible. When he talks about those on the radical left, who is he talking about?
Anybody from Bernie Sanders to AOC to anybody who disagrees with him.
Anybody who thinks pardoning insurrectionists is not a very good thing to do. Anybody who thinks insurrection is not a very good thing to do.
Absolutely not. But I got to tell you, James, and this is a much wiser person than me. He happened to be my older brother. He passed away some years ago. He said to me once that you can't be halfway for the First Amendment. Now, the First Amendment is, quite frankly, freedom of speech. And I've always believed throughout my life, after he told me that the way to counter bad speech is with better speech. And we don't hear enough of that.
Well, this is why Trump's comments yesterday are so difficult, isn't it? Because he's got almost that's why I played the two clips at the beginning, and you as a broadcaster will have appreciated that. The idea that the guy who sounded, to me at least, and I'm, as always on this programme, open to contradiction, open to challenge, the guy who sounded to me quite measured and thoughtful has been fired by MSNBC, and the guy using words like avenge on Fox News is still in his job. He's probably going to get promoted.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jesse Waters is one of those guys he's a word pimp, just like Charlie Kirk was a word pimp. These are people who speak to an audience that is, if you use church terms, it's a congregation of the converted. These are people who all believe in their heart of hearts that what they've been told is all correct, and that their job is to fight for what they've been told. No matter what idiot told them.
Don't stop and ask questions. Don't stop and ask for evidence. Just feel the anger, feel the hatred, and get out there and indulge it. And the people on the other side of the argument who are saying, don't be guided by hatred, don't be guided by fury, condemn all acts of political violence, especially if they're undertaken by people who may be on a similar political page to you. They are completely drowned out. That's the bit I can't quite get used to yet. Is that some of it is cowardice, some of it is self-interest, some of it will be fear. You saw what happened to Stephen Colbert. But the idea that the narrative now is being defined by the people who are in favour of political violence and somehow managing to cast their political enemies as being the people who are in favour of political violence, when the polar opposite is true. The polar opposite is true.
Absolutely, the polar opposite is true. And until the people, and there's a guy, you know who John Leguizamo is?
Yeah, the actor.
Yeah. he's put out a series of posts, I guess it's on YouTube or whatever, and he makes more sense than all the rest of these clowns combined. Because what he says is that the people that you talk about, not the insurrectionists, not the people who believe everything Donald Trump says, but people who believe in better speech than what Donald Trump is spewing, need to get together, need to get strategic, and need to act, and not violently.
There is no resistance. You need rhetorical resistance. But of course, he's attacking the rhetoric already when there isn't any. I mean, the more you dig into his words, the harder it is to sustain the idea that he's not on the ball at least some of the time, because there's a sort of pincer movement to his logic, but the completely at odds with reality it becomes. There are lines on there in various historical periods about how effective it is to accuse your enemy of doing exactly what it is that you're doing. So condemn all political violence. As Mark points out, the First Amendment, there is no better honouring of the First Amendment than to condemn absolutely always the idea of anybody being killed for their opinions, killed for their words, killed for their ideas, challenged, if they breach legal thresholds, prosecuted, but killed? Absolutely never. And yet, an awful lot of what I'm seeing and hearing seems to say to me, and I could be wrong, and Mark could be wrong, and you can call me and tell me, it seems to say, no, you don't understand. That's all fine when we do it. That's kind of how it's looking. Mark Riley in Brighton, many thanks indeed. It's 25 to 12. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:38, and I mean, who does Trump want to be punished for the crime committed in America yesterday, for the killing of Charlie Kirk, when he talks about the radical left? And how do all the free speech champions feel about him suggesting that you shouldn't call people names anymore or make historical comparisons? He writes this, or he said, this kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. There are no jokes here to be made about he must have evidence about that the FBI is unaware of. He's got no clue. He's got no more idea than anybody. But he knows how to play a room, or he knows how to play half a room. And he is priming his supporters to feel rage towards people other than Charlie Kirk's killer. This is the point, isn't it? It's got a touch of the Southport killings to it, in a way. And the deliberate lies that were spread by the usual suspects and, of course, disseminated and amplified by people like Nigel Farage. A desperate attempt, an obvious and transparent attempt to hold entirely innocent people responsible for the crimes of a guilty person. They even lied about who the guilty person was in order to cast their net even wider to catch innocent people. And that surely is the divide. It's not about party politics. It's not about history. It's not about religion or ethnicity or culture. You either think that completely innocent person over there should be punished for a crime committed by that guilty person over there. You either think that or you don't. And the speed and the sincerity with which people from the left in the United States of America, in politics and media, came to condemn the killing of Charlie Kirk, somebody whose views, now I know a little bit more about them, I can say with some confidence, they must have found reprehensible. People who have come under repeated attack from people who profess to be supporters of Donald Trump, people who wear their support for Donald Trump on their sleeves. And you think about the peril that public servants were put in on January the 6th, 2021, as a direct consequence of lies that were told. And the man who told the lies is now claiming that words can kill. Do you know what? I tell you what, it's really important to do this, isn't it? It's actually weirdly comforting to actually just get your fingers on reality again and to stop reeling with shock, is why Mark was such a great caller. Reeling with shock at the madness of it all. The more you think about it and the more you talk about it, oddly, the less mad it gets, which is probably why people are so furious at the very notion of a newspaper printing the words of Charlie Kirk or a broadcaster playing out the words of Charlie Kirk. Because that allows the narrative to continue to be chaotic. There are
people who have done terrible things, and they must be held to account for doing their terrible things. And shooting Charlie Kirk was a terrible thing. And that's it. Doesn't extend to anybody else unless you've got evidence of incitement. Someone sets fire to a hotel full of asylum seekers, and somebody has called for a hotel full of asylum seekers to be set fire to. You've got to send in the authorities and find out what the heck is going on there in the context of incitement. Someone shoots a right-wing influencer, and even when you don't know who it is, you're trying to put completely different people on the hook for it. Who are the radical left? Is it literally everybody who objects to crimes being committed in the name of a lie about the 2020 election? Is that it? Are they all radical left? Who are they? Who are these people? 11:42 is the time. You'll like this from Carl. You are a vile, horrible little man, O'Brien. Any excuse to attack Trump, but using Charlie Kirk, you're the sickest lefty ever. Carl, of course, listening to the same show as you are, but that's the point, isn't it? He's hearing truth. Everything that I've said about... I've read you Donald Trump's own words. I've reminded you of what Charlie Kirk stood for. I have highlighted the hypocrisy of claiming to be repelled by political violence while simultaneously exonerating and praising and championing people who undertook it in defence of a lie that you told. And Charlie Kirk only enjoyed the status that he enjoyed as a consequence of his proximity to Trump. So trying to separate one from the other is like trying to get the eggs out of a baked cake. But Carl hates what he's hearing. But he doesn't, does he? He hates what he's seeing in the mirror that I'm holding up. My God, this man's right. The people I admire, the cult that I am in, is currently professing to be repelled by political violence, but they are objectively and demonstrably in favour of it because they have been pardoning people who do it, championing people who undertake political violence. I am against all of it. I'm against all political violence. You should never be hurt, let alone killed, for your opinions. It's a threshold of prosecution, but it's not hard, Carl. Just be against all of it. Be against all political violence. Not just the political violence that is undertaken by people you think might be on a different side of the political divide from you, because you don't even know who shot this poor man. You've got no idea who shot him, and nor has Donald Trump, but he's already trying to rile you up to hate people who had nothing to do with the shooting. So who's in favour of political violence? How much trouble is America in? Mark's optimistic analysis notwithstanding, something feels bad, right? Something feels dark. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:47. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and I don't know that it is necessarily reassuring, but it's helpful to focus on the facts. And the facts are that a terrible murder took place in the United States, and the president of that country chose to use it to rile up his supporters against lots and lots of people who definitely had nothing to do with the murder. Whether or not they share political opinions with the person who undertook the murder, we do not know, because we don't know who did the murder. But it hasn't stopped Donald Trump complaining in the most potentially insightful of terms about what he calls the radical left. But of course he doesn't tell us who that is. He just talks about people who compared Charlie Kirk to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. So there should be a list available of who those people are. But I wouldn't want it to be published, because God knows how a fragile mind might respond to Donald Trump's, the actual president's claim that those people would be somehow responsible for the actions of an as yet unidentified murderer. It's true, isn't it? It is actually quite reassuring. The more you talk about it, the madder it becomes. And it's good to know that it is actually mad, and you can still anatomise the madness. But that doesn't, of course, dilute the fear of what might be coming. It's extraordinary. 11:49 is the time. Ned's in Manila in the Philippines. Ned, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First-time caller. So a little bit nervous, but I know it's just you. Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much for just being honest in yesterday's program and not whitewashing the things that he said, that Charlie Kirk says. A lot of news media outlets were kind of picking his less controversial points and putting those forwards and saying, this great hero of a man. And really, I just find him to be vile and divisive. So I'm in Manila, but I'm a British American. I'm a dual citizen. I've been living in America for the last 12 years before I came here.
Okay.
And the political climate has changed a lot. I was there in 2012. We went through, the 2016 elections, Bernie, Hillary, all of that stuff. And then things got more and more divisive, I think probably to do with social media.
Yes, for sure.
And now we're getting to a point where it's turning into, I'm actually concerned, I'm much more concerned to my safety than I've ever been. Now, I'm quite liberal. I'm a liberal gun owner, which is a relatively rare thing for a British guy as well. So, but it came about from the right wing, the rise of the right wing. I started thinking, look, everyone around me has firearms. Everyone in my city, Arizona, this was Phoenix, quite conservative. I probably need to start arming myself because of the rise of the right wing and the rise of these crazy things that are happening in our streets. And the protests and, the Stop the Steal and the insurrection, all this stuff. And now this has just really given another, I don't know, just more flames on the fire for the right wing to rise up further and to start taking, I'm very concerned about close to civil war or
are you really? I think that would have been hyperbole 2 years ago, but maybe not actually. After January the 6th, it seemed a fairly reasonable fear, but then of course your fellow Americans re-elected him, so they obviously weren't as troubled by the notion of trying to overthrow democracy using political violence as you were. Sometimes maybe the simplistic stuff is good because it isn't very complicated and we can tie ourselves in knots thinking that it is. But he is simply accusing his political enemies of doing things that they haven't done, but he has.
Yes, and I see similarities. I don't think that most of America is still dealing with inflation, but the majority of America, the average people, it's the same in England, but this small minority that are controlling the media, I don't want to get into like conspiracy theories or anything like that, but there's a small number of people who are consistently talking about the same things. They're very good on messaging, and they're saying, it's the small boats in England, and it's the undocumented people in America taking your jobs, and it's nothing to do with this oligarchy we have being created and the corruption effectively. And it's just becoming a very scary place, and I think.
Well, it's also being commoditised. So there's people have always been able to sell newspapers peddling hatred. The Daily Mail was peddling hatred against German Jewish refugees in the 1930s, and the copy is still readily available. But social media seems to have elevated it into a different space, and I don't know, weaponized things even more, in that you can probably create a world in which you really do believe that the election was stolen, that vaccines are bad, that Donald Trump is going to rescue you from all of the paedophiles like Jeffrey Epstein, and logic doesn't get a look in. And in order to sustain that, the last thing he can do, or his supporters can do, is recognise the importance of logic or facts. Just keep stoking.
Yes, and I think you're hitting it right there. But I also feel that what you may be missing, and I'm not much younger than you. I'm 41, but I grew up always online.
Yeah, I
I'm
have
an
definitely
IT
got
guy
a gap in my knowledge. I hardly knew who Charlie Kirk was until yesterday.
Right. So the things that I see online, I said this years ago, I see them happen in America, and I see them roll out in England 5 to 10 years later.
Yeah.
And it's this online. I don't think people are aware. You're saying to your callers and to people, well, it's only this small number of people. I'm like, it is a small number of people, but they have such a voice that the media is completely oblivious to. And this is why Charlie Kirk is so famous in that circle is that he got the people out to vote, right?
Yes.
He got people that were traditionally voting Democrat, and I think we're not doing ourselves any favors by leaving fairly geriatric Democratic leaders in their place.
There is no resistance.
They're trying to do,
that's the point Mark made, and it is kind of scary. Thank you,
yes.
Ned. Thank you. So there's a slight little delay on the line, which is why we kind of sounded like we were interrupting each other a couple of times towards the interrupting each other. Thank you. I hope you're wrong, obviously, but I think you're right about the online stuff. Clearly, it's a problem with being having cut your teeth in newspapers. You were so convinced when it started that social media was like a sort of upstart crow, and you weren't going to have to worry about it that much, and it wasn't proper media and stuff like that. You still have. It's really weird. And I'm I might be older than Ned, but I'm still not that old compared to people who are in control or in the big jobs in the UK media. You still have that sense that it's a bit fringe and a bit niche. That is stupid and wrong and ridiculous. And of course, the success and the huge celebrity of somebody like Charlie Kirk, who was a creature of the internet, an online creation, an online star, reminds you of the heft. Trump got it, Biden didn't. The heft that these people carry. It was one of Trump's sons, wasn't it? It was the youngest son that was supposed to have been responsible for him embracing the world of the podcast. And that is absolutely where a lot of the political capital, a lot of the votes lie. Just mentioning that thing about the FBI, a special agent in charge of Utah's FBI division, frequently described as legendary, would, this time last month, have been leading the ongoing manhunt for Charlie Kirk's assassin. But she was pushed out of the role in August, despite many, many colleagues describing her as absolutely the best in the entire bureau. Her name was Mehtab Saeed, and it was the leader of the FBI, just the man put there by Donald Trump, who apparently sort of led the squeezing out process. She would have been leading this investigation, and she's not there because of Donald Trump's appointee. 11:57 is the time. Chris is in Richmond. Chris, what would you like to say?
Hi, yes. I'm 16 years here in the UK, mostly here in southwest London, and it just, honestly, it terrifies me what's going on in the US, and you can feel it. We go back every year, and it's the kind of thing where, 2-3 years ago, as you said, I wouldn't worry about having discussions out at dinner. Now, I feel as if I express an opinion and there's anyone near me, I do really worry about the kind of response that I would get. There is a nervy sense there. And I was a registered Republican most of my life, big Colin Powell fan, voted for John McCain. I really, I grew up kind of seeing them, as my dad was in the Navy, as being, real heroes in the government. But honestly, it's impossible now to be a Republican or a Democrat for that matter, because if you have an opinion, you're immediately labeled and you're thrown into whatever bucket they decide is your home. And you can't have cross-party beliefs. You can't have middle-of-the-road conversations anymore. There is no discourse. It's, I hate you because you didn't agree with me there. And honestly, I feel like it comes from both sides, because you can see for every good Democratic response that's out there, there are a slew of some really horrible, visceral responses about the death of Charlie Kirk, and it doesn't help. And I think all of this is just, it's becoming a really scary, from the outside
you are
in.
either repelled by political violence or you are not, and it doesn't matter who is the subject or the perpetrator of the violence. And you're right, there are people who are not repelled by this instance of political violence, just as there are people who aren't repelled by any of the others. Do you know what the Professor Watch list is? Because I've been focusing on the free speech element of this conversation. I've just stumbled again. Looking at the transcript of what Donald Trump said yesterday when he is attacking people for saying things, and in the same speech says, "Tonight I ask all Americans to commit themselves to the American values for which Charlie Kirk lived and died, the values of free speech, citizenship, the rule of law." And he has ridden roughshod, definitely over the rule of law, and he's literally calling for a cessation of free speech, and Charlie Kirk is being cited as a champion of both. Do you know what the Professor Watch list is? Because I've only been introduced to this today.
I mean, I don't know that much about it. I do know that it is that attempt to, identify any professors who speak radically about anything.
Well, not even radically. I don't even know what radically means, to be honest, in this context. Just to say anything that Charlie Kirk didn't like. This is a website he set up to kind of like a McCarthyite list of professors who weren't suitably on message, and yet he's the big free speech guy.
He would agree in free speech within the bubble that he considers speech. I mean, he frequently misquotes scripture, frequently uses the poor. I mean, oftentimes, you were saying earlier, he takes these, as the other caller did earlier, he takes these young kids in university and twists their words so that they either sound ignorant or they sound uneducated. And oftentimes, there's quite a few of them, this is the most exposure they've ever had to politics. And he uses that to either make them sound uneducated or make them sound extreme in whatever their beliefs are. They're not allowed to have opinions, and they're not even allowed to learn how to form their opinions.
The student point is crucial. I hadn't picked up on that before. So he's attacking the professors because they presumably are the ones that would be able to pull his arguments apart quite easily, but he's not engaging in debate with them. He's just assembling lists of the ones that are persona non grata or must be hounded out of their roles. And you go after the students, and none of us are at our best or our most knowledgeable or our most adroit when we are 19, 20 years old. And that is where you create the idea of the enemy, because somebody says something on a clip that they might have immediately regretted, or they might have not thought about very much, or they might have been edited to look worse than they were. And that is how he's created. That's why he's so valuable, because he has helped create the idea of an army of radical leftists out there who wish him and his allies harm.
Well, if you don't want the professors to teach these kids how to be more articulate, you go after the professors. They don't want to listen to them in class. Trump's playbook right now, and Charlie Kirk, for that matter's playbook, is exactly that. Yell the loudest, point the finger wherever you can. Eventually, you'll hit a target, and everybody will agree with you, because we're not talking about the Colorado shooting yesterday, where high schoolers fled and knocked on neighbors' doors, absolutely terrified. And because it happens all the time, so let's just leave that there.
And it's something he chalked up as a necessary evil, really, in the context of the Second Amendment.
Yes.
He himself, and again, that's something that does have a relevance to the conversation that we're having now. Just as the continuing failure to find the person responsible probably has something to do, whether they succeed eventually or not, the current continuing failure probably has something to do with getting rid of the brilliant FBI operative that was running the Utah division until a month ago. Fired by, or squeezed out by, or let go by Donald Trump's own appointee. But I don't imagine any of the people crying vengeance on Fox News will be pointing that out anytime soon. It's 12:02.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 6 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where, I mean, some days it feels like all stories are linked, doesn't it? I can't see any links between the discussion about the ongoing search for Charlie Kirk's killer and, of course, the ongoing search, if you like, for logic in the argument that he was a champion of free speech, and therefore people should stop criticising anybody from his side of the political aisle, which seems to be the point that the president was making. Just to add the final word to that conversation, Kash Patel, the FBI director appointed by Donald Trump, despite not being obviously qualified for the job, is currently being sued by agents who were removed from the service, they allege, to appease President Donald Trump. So FBI people who were, for example, investigating the January the 6th insurrection have been removed from their job because Donald Trump wants them removed. And whether or not that has any impact whatsoever upon the, I think, widely regarded as unsatisfactory early response to this shooting, I do not know. But it's extraordinary when you think about how important the FBI is. If you really do care about people who perpetrate political violence, it's extraordinary that people could be cheering along the apparent weakening of it, or indeed the appointment to the leadership of it of somebody pretty obviously unqualified. 8 minutes after 12. So the abiding thought I've got is free speech for me, but not for thee. Which brings us to that other topic that I touched on in the last hour, which was that weird window in British history where people on the right of our politics were claiming that expressing horror at what was going on in Gaza and the developing carnage somehow meant that you supported the atrocities of October the 7th undertaken by Hamas. The idea that if you marched to show solidarity with the Palestinian people or to plead with Benjamin Netanyahu to cease his military campaigns, then you must somehow be a supporter of Hamas. And you don't need me to remind you of the names of people in politics and indeed in the media who were prepared to flirt with that hideous libel, but they did. Flirt they did. And in fact, in some cases, they even consummated the relationship. And that, of course, is the policing of free speech, the policing of freedom of assembly, very much First Amendment issues, although applicable in this case on this side of the Atlantic. And that conversation that we've had more times probably in the last 2 years than any other about the point at which Benjamin Netanyahu's mission, the point at which Benjamin Netanyahu's administration became untenable, the point at which the response to the atrocity of October the 7th became disproportionate or genocidal, even in the views of many, many, many scholars and others. That has been unfolding hand in hand with now rather quiet attempts, although they haven't disappeared completely, from people in the political and media spheres to seek to portray anybody who sympathises or indeed feels their heart break at the ongoing horrors in Gaza, tens now of thousands of people killed, as being somehow not, I don't know, as being what? What would they be? Radical leftists? Please stop killing innocent people, says a radical leftist? I don't know. But this isn't a light-hearted conversation, although the way into it is not serious, if that makes sense. The way into it is the Eurovision Song Contest. And one of the other appalling horrors that Benjamin Netanyahu has visited upon Israel, and this isn't by any measure the worst, obviously, is that Israel's involvement in the Eurovision Song Contest has now gone from being a mystery hour question to being a matter of international diplomacy. It used to be a mystery hour question. Why is Israel allowed in the Eurovision Song Contest when they are not a European country? And the answer, if I can remember, has something to do with television broadcasters, like a union of international television broadcasters who were under the banner of Eurovision, like a name, as my late father used to say. It says Daz on the side of buses, but it doesn't mean they sell it inside. So the name Eurovision was the name of a sort of international TV platform of which Israel was a part. This might be in the Mystery Hour board game. And that, of course, was the only real interest previously around Israel's involvement in the song contest. It was, how come that a non-European... I think Australia are in it now, aren't they? Presumably for the same reasons. But if you really want to register your horror, your abject horror, and your incredible disapproval at Netanyahu's continuing course of action, the killing of journalists, the killing of aid workers, the killing of children, the contempt for international law, the repeated attacks on sovereign neighbours, including the one that was doing its best in the case of Qatar to host peace talks, or at least to promote peace. Is it the European Broadcasting Union? I think it was. The inability of to register protest. On the one hand, if you march, you get called a Hamas sympathiser. If you boycotts, you end up punishing people who aren't responsible. There's plenty of people in Israel who hate what Benjamin Netanyahu was doing up to, and including a lot of the families of the remaining hostages. What else can you do? So Ireland has decided to boycott it if Israel are involved. The story was quite big last year, wasn't it? I can't remember why it died down, actually. But the Irish broadcaster, because it's the national broadcaster that would make this decision, I think for the same reasons that Israel are involved in it. It's not a political union, it's a media union. The European Television Union has always had Israel in it. They are not going to compete this year if Israel do. And they are not the first, and indeed, since we've been on air this morning, I don't think they're the last either. So Spain, Iceland and Slovenia have all warned that they will quit the competition if Italy takes part. On the other hand, Italy and Germany, it's reported today, may abandon the competition if Israel is removed, or if Israel is banned, if Israel is excluded from the competition against their own wishes. It's not until next May, so there is a little bit of time for the dust to settle. But the RTE, the Irish state broadcaster, has made its position unequivocal. It is RTE's position that Ireland will not take part in the 2026 Eurovision Song Contest if the participation of Israel goes ahead. They have proved themselves to be one of the most pro-Palestinian countries in the EU, formally recognising Palestine last year, long before Keir Starmer even started talking about it. And the other countries are beginning to assemble already, Spain, Iceland and Slovenia. And since we have been on air this morning, is this the Dutch one? I can't see what country this is from. It is, yes. So Avrotros, the Dutch broadcaster, has now itself decided that they won't be getting involved either unless Israel is excluded, and I don't think this will happen unless Israel withdraws itself. So you've got the Spanish cultural minister saying that Israel's broadcaster KAN, so it's the broadcaster you'd be banning. I don't think we can normalise Israel's participation in international events as if nothing is happening. And I am very grateful to the Spanish culture minister, Ernest Urtasun, for giving me my question. Okay? Is that true? Does it normalise? Well, it does, doesn't it? Israel's participation in international events as if nothing is happening. Is it appropriate to focus on a song competition, albeit a unique song competition, a song competition that has a unique status in our affections, if that's the right word to use? It's never been the same since Terry Wogan stopped doing it. And I'm a big fan of Graham Norton's. But because there's two ways into this. The one is, come on, can we separate the two? Can we not just acknowledge that music transcends politics and even war? And the other one is, actually, I mean, what can you do to register your horror at what Netanyahu continues to do? If the state broadcaster is allowed to compete in a competition while undertaking what many of the other states involved consider to be at the very worst genocide and at the very least war crimes and ethnic cleansing, what message does it send to the Israeli regime and to the world at large if they are invited to the Eurovision Song Contest? Things are measurably worse than they were last time round. Anybody who was hoping that Netanyahu was not all of the things that his harshest critics have called him have been proved horribly wrong. The carnage continues. The justification for it has been almost entirely removed. And yet on he goes, extending the scope of his ambition even now beyond the borders of Israel and Gaza and into other countries like Qatar and, somewhat less controversially, I suppose, Iran. So I just want to know what you think about this. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not 100% sure what I think. And I apologise for that, because by 17 minutes after 12 on a Friday, I should have a nice pungent opinion about almost everything. I think I agree with the Spanish culture minister. I think the idea of the state of Israel being treated as if it wasn't currently embarked upon a course that many people consider to be genocidal is just a little bit weird. But I do have, so let's say that's 60, 70%. I do also find myself recognising that, when this nightmare ends, Israel will still, please God, be Israel. And the people that live there have what's the word that I'm looking for? I guess the right to engage in this kind of entertainment, as much right as anybody else does, regardless of what their political leaders are doing. That's the point I'm trying to make. So 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Let's start the clock for the accusations of anti-Semitism for even asking this question, shall we? And I'll be happy to read some of those out to you later. But the question of whether or not the country currently embarked upon its course of carnage in Gaza and beyond should be able to come along and sing a novelty song or indeed a serious song at the Eurovision Song Contest is one which many countries have already answered. The votes are in from Ireland, and the answer is no. The votes are in from Spain, and the answer is no, they should not. Iceland have voted. Well, the results of the Iceland jury, no, they should not be able to take part. Slovenia has voted. The Netherlands have voted. And they have all voted no. The mess diplomatically on the horizon comes when all the countries that are threatening to pull out if they are excluded kick in, which would be Switzerland, Austria, Greece, Azerbaijan and Cyprus are expected to support Israel if it is put to a vote. But there you go. I don't need a particularly complicated question on this one, do I? What do you think about this suggestion? 0345 6060 973. What would it achieve? Let's say it went it is going ahead. We don't know how it will unfold. But what does this achieve? What does Ireland's decision actually achieve? Is it going to save a single Palestinian life? Or is it designed to achieve something else? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. It's 20 minutes past 12.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 12 is the time. Our time together this week almost at an end. Sheila Fogarty, of course, joining you at 1 o'clock, although I must give you a quick heads up on this week's full disclosure. If you want another hour of me in your ear over the course of the weekend, then it's a particularly pleasant one this week. And it's never bad, is it? I'm never going to say, don't bother listening to full disclosure this week. It's a little bit rubbish. But there's quite a few coming now in the pipeline, as it were. I did Jamie Oliver yesterday and Dr. Richard Shepherd, who used to be the Home Office pathologist. Two completely different interviewees, as you might imagine, although they did have at least one thing in common. I'll leave you to speculate on what that might have been, but both on exceptional form and both truly fascinating interview subjects. This week's is neither of them. I'm going to build a little bit of tension on who it actually is, and I shall tell you shortly. But the question that we are concerning ourselves with this year is this hour is pretty straightforward. The Irish are going to boycott Eurovision if Israel are involved, and I want to know what you think about that idea. That's all. 0345 6060 973. The most successful country in the history of Eurovision, alongside Sweden, would you believe? So, they carry more heft in this context than perhaps population size would ordinarily allow. And it is to Ireland that we go first, and in fact, where I'm going after the show today. Ken's in Cork. Ken, what would you like to say?
Well, I just think at the moment, the way things are and the genocide that's going on, I think it's the small things that'll hit now. I think if this is small and it hits now, well, 10 small things that happen now highlight the genocide. I don't know whether it'll have too much to do next year when the competition is on. But, I mean, you're talking about it today. It's been talked about in the papers here.
How big a story is it over there?
Oh, it'll be big because RTE is the main broadcaster. I mean, I think they did have a problem last year. I think, if I might be wrong, that Israel came second last year.
Don't ask me, mate.
And I think that RTE questioned the European Broadcasting Union on it about 3 or 4 weeks ago, saying, how did this happen and can we see the votes? And I don't think they ever got a reply.
Oh, OK. That's a bit tinfoil hat, isn't it? I mean, maybe. Well, maybe not. I don't know. But the problem I have with what you have said is I don't think it will make the blindest bit of difference. I mean, let's be honest. You've got governments queuing up to condemn and to withdraw historic support. Allies united now, apart from Trump in their even Trump was unhappy about the attack upon the sovereign territory of Qatar. I don't know that not letting them in the Eurovision Song Contest is going to send a very loud message to Benjamin Netanyahu, is it?
Well, I think here we've always been very pro-Palestine here, okay?
Yes, of course.
It's evident everywhere you go. I mean, it just is, and it's about our occupation in the past, I suppose, and hunger for us in the past with our famine. So we have commonality there, I believe. You know, maybe it touches us a little bit differently here. But I do think...
I don't think there's any maybe. I don't think there's any maybe about it. I think it's impossible to understand Irish attitudes to the people of Palestine without understanding Irish history.
Yeah, I agree. But I think it's just, it has to be, we have to do something. I believe there's been a change in the last few weeks. I believe with the way the governments are speaking, and I really do, there has been a small little bit of change. Not as on the Israeli side, if anything, obviously they're going worse on what they're trying to do. But I think there has definitely been a change with us here.
But it won't make the blindest bit of difference to anything except some sort of obscure optics, and yet you still think it should go ahead because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Eurovision, it may not be big, but it is very, very much across Europe. I mean, so many people watch it because it's kind of...
Well, what impact would it have? And we don't know how it's going to play out either, because if Italy and Germany are threatening to pull out if Israel are expelled, if it's put to a vote, then some countries will have the decision taken for them. But the ones that are coming pretty close already to saying that they'll pull out if Israel is banned, even if it comes after a democratic exercise, the whole project could be messed up for I mean, goodness knows how long, because Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't show much sign of changing his tactics anytime soon. 26 minutes after 12. As promised, here it is. This is from Debbie. Still dishing out your revolting Jew hate, O'Brien, writes Debbie, who's been listening to the same radio show that you've been listening to. Should the Irish, Slovenian, Spanish and Icelandic broadcasting organisations be calling for Israel to be removed from the Eurovision Song Contest, is the question. Still dishing out your revolting Jew hate is Debbie's answer. I told you, to be fair, at the moment that's the only one, but, you know, cometh the hour. 12:26 is the time. Dave's in Warwick. Dave, what do you reckon?
Hi, good afternoon, Jew-hating James.
Hello, Dave. I don't think we should make light of it.
I think we should look at these people and actually think, no, you kind of lost the plot a bit. Because, to be honest, the politics...
You mean the people threatening not to go, threatening to boycott it?
No. Let me just say, first of all, the first thing I thought, strangely, of your question was 1998, when Dana International won with Diva.
Oh, that was brilliant.
It's a fantastic song. Israeli, of course. I think Sharon Cohen, I think, is the real name. It's Dana International, it's a performing name. But everybody was so up for that win. They really were. And it shows, I think, how far Israel has slid in the world under Netanyahu.
I'm glad you use his name, because he has done this. He has transformed Israel from a country that basked in the joy of nations when Dana International romped to victory into a country that a lot of the fellow contestants now don't want to compete alongside.
But of course there were a lot of Israelis who didn't want Dana International to take part, that were absolutely outraged because they were what you'd sort of, I guess, the further, more orthodox, within Israel. And there was a lot of denouncements for that performance. But I think couple this with what's going on now, plus there's the cultural boycott building in the US. You're getting over 4,000 actors, including big Hollywood names, saying we won't work on things associated with Israel while this is going on.
Crucially, while this is going on. You have to keep hitting that drum, while this is going on, because that's what makes a mockery of people like Debbie and others. It is an objection to what is being done. It's not an objection to anybody's origins or ethnicity, religion or geography. It's an objection to what is happening in Gaza and continues to happen in Gaza.
Absolutely. What I think will happen with Eurovision, as of just a final guess, is I think what will happen between now and May, probably there will be so many countries that have pulled out, it may not even be possible to run the actual event itself. If the Israelis were wise, some could say withdrawal at this particular time while this.
But then they're admitting that they're doing something wrong, aren't they?
Exactly. Well, it won't happen anyway, because there was a lot of problems last year, and Netanyahu was very publicly out supporting their act, And it will just be
that's a problem for the people who think that the politics and music should be kept separate, isn't it? So if he was, I don't remember that. I don't follow it as closely as I used to do. But so you're in favour of this, then, clearly.
No. I'm saying I'm not. I'm completely on the fence, to be quite honest.
Okay.
I think what will happen will be that the event, like with the student riots and the Cannes Film Festival in 1968, the event just couldn't physically take place. I think something like that may be the results. Probably also, I think, because so many countries will pull out between now and then, that Eurovision will just say, well, we can't actually run it because we don't have the cash to do it.
So it would become sort of unsustainable. Okay. So you're coming at it from a very logistical angle, and I like it. I'm here for it. The idea that this is about not about necessarily the wisdom of the original idea, but the likely outcome of it. I'll steer everybody else back to the wisdom, if you like, of the original idea. And the idea is that we will boycott it, says Ireland. We will boycott it, says the Netherlands and Spain and Iceland and Slovenia. And what do we think of that? And it's usually a very unifying force, the Eurovision Song Contest. And thanks to Benjamin Netanyahu, it has become the opposite of that. It has now something else that has become subject to division and rancour with an R. Here's Amelia Cox with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:33. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, so many people have made this joke. I presume that it is already out there in the ether. And not to make light of the very serious context in which Ireland and other countries are threatening to pull out of the Eurovision Song Contest if Israel is involved. If enough countries pull out, we might win. Might actually give the UK a chance for the first time in decades. But even then, it's probably unlikely. Hannah is in Southend on this question. Hannah, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello there. Long-time listener, a bit nervous. I never thought I'd be ringing you about Eurovision.
I mean, in a way, you're also ringing me about the ongoing carnage in Gaza, so it's a double bubble, really, this one, isn't it?
Yeah. Two birds and all that. I'm a long-time fan of Eurovision. I grew up with it. It means a lot to me, which some people might think that's strange, but the same way... You're
far from alone, Hannah. You're far from alone.
Well, yeah, it's a big event in my life, and it always has been.
Yeah.
And if we put the genocide aside for one moment, which it clearly is, I support RTE, and I'm glad the Spanish broadcaster came forward because they're one of the big five. I wish the BBC to do the same. Because for me, as a long-time fan of the Eurovision Song Contest, for the past 2 years, Israel have made it a nasty competition. And because I am a fan, I sort of dip into following the other artists on their social media. I sort of dip into Twitter, I dip into Reddit, and I wouldn't say I'm in the bubble, but I pay attention to the things that some of the other delegations have been saying, some of the participants have been saying, and Israel has created a nasty environment in the competition, and that's reflected on me as a viewer. You know, the way they behaved towards the Irish delegation, Bambi Thug in 24, with the Dutch guy as well.
The accusation for people who the accusation was that they were following other acts around and filming them and then posting clips online without their permission.
Absolutely. Exactly. They were self-creating a nasty environment. And that completely reflects back to me as a fan. I can feel the tension. And you know, even in the previous contest just that's happened, you know, they sort of removed the fan noise from the arena, which adds so much to so many songs when you can hear the fans cheering. But the EBU was so afraid of the booing or Free Palestine chants that they removed it. So again, that's another aspect where I'm like, well, you're making this competition unbearable.
I mean, you're my correspondent here, and you obviously know a lot more about all of this than I do. But and you may not be able to answer this question, but if the Israeli act that year, or the Israeli delegation that year, were here to defend themselves and explain why they had been, or certainly why the Dutch team accused them of filming them and posting clips online without their permission, or of treating Bambi Thug, the Irish act, similarly. What reason would they have given? If they say why, let's presume they were doing it, but not necessarily for the reasons that you presume. What reasons would they give for behaving in the way that you describe?
I genuinely think they would probably say they were feeling intimidated themselves, and to be honest, I wouldn't believe them.
Well, you just said that the room could be full of people booing, potentially.
Yeah.
And that would make them feel intimidated. It would make me feel intimidated.
They've had anti-booing technology at Eurovision since 2015 when...
you really
Russia
do know your
invaded
stuff.
Crimea.
This is getting a bit like Mastermind, this.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit... I wouldn't say I'm embarrassed, but I would say I'm heavily invested. I really do love the competition. So they've had that technology, but the competition just gone, they sort of cut the fan noise completely, and that really does change the perspective. But I will also say, as a long-time fan, and sort of echo what the previous caller just said, Israel have done themselves a real disservice because they used to be a powerhouse in Eurovision. They were someone you looked forward to every year, thinking, okay, what's Israel going to send, because they bring it. And the past 2 years, they have brought nothing but soppy propaganda of ballads that if any other country had sent them, such as, Albania or Slovenia themselves, they wouldn't have even qualified. So they've been sending... Well, I know music. I know music is, it's not for everyone, but their songs the past 2 years haven't been great. And there's also, they happened to win the televote this year. Absolutely, you cannot convince me there was not something nefarious involved in that. They were. Well, I can't
try to convince you of that because I don't have any of the knowledge or any of the grasp that you have. But as a lifelong Eurovision fanatic, you obviously feel that the continuing involvement of Israel, having moved, as you've attested, from a rather beautiful position of affection and enjoyment, has now moved into something altogether more divisive and difficult, and therefore you support the decision of the Irish broadcasters and others to call for them to be removed. If you ever do go on Mastermind, Hannah, let me know, won't you? And I'll put a few quid on you to go all the way. 12:39 is the time. And listen, I have repeatedly reminded you that a plurality of international scholars now have, or at least a significant number of international scholars, some of whom we have spoken to, have concluded that Israel's already passed the threshold for genocide. But of course, the International Criminal Court has not. And there's even contradiction within the UK cabinet. It's free speech in the news an awful lot at the moment, so I'm happy for everybody to exercise their free speech, and I will continue to exercise mine as well. But it is not yet, and may never be, an established matter of international legal fact. And you can't, I'm probably wasting my breath, but you can't get cross with me for pointing that out, because it's not an opinion, it's just counting. Thank you, Hannah. Malik's in Leicester. Malik, what would you like to say?
Thank you very much for taking me. There are two sides of this. From an Israeli point of view, of course, it will not make any difference. Other side is, it has made someone like you, made a whole program about of it, and someone like me, who never rang LBC before, ringing you and talking to you about this one.
Yeah, so, but we don't know yet. We don't know yet whether or not you're going to say anything interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Go on, then.
I'm not as articulate person as you are, or I'm a layman. As a matter of fact, I'm an immigrant.
Okay.
So I don't know what my voice is even worth of saying anything about this matter.
Your voice on this program is worth as much as anybody else's, Malik. All right? Never forget that, please.
So as far as creating an awareness or making it as a symbolic gesture, I would compliment Irish government, because I'm pretty sure they also are aware of this thing, that this will not make any difference to Mr. Netanyahu's plan of doing what he wants to do or carry on what he's doing so far. But it has made someone like you, a man of influence, to brought it up and
well, I mean, we talk about the situation a lot on the programme, and it's been clear to me for some time that Netanyahu's course of action is entirely unconscionable, even as people remain free to disagree with that. I don't know that the intervention by these broadcasters has changed quite as much as you think, and as you attest, you know, there's not going to be a talk at the next cabinet meeting about whether or not we should stop killing people in Gaza because we might lose our place in the Eurovision Song Contest, is there?
Exactly. I agree with you, and that's why I actually did mention it, that it would make a difference if you kind of put a ban on Israeli fans or supporters on events like UEFA or EuroLeague. And there's one question I would like to ask you, because as a layman, as an immigrant, I do not understand why Israel is allowed in these events. Israel is not in Europe, it's in Asia. So why? I mean, I would like to ask you this. Maybe you can educate me on this one.
Well, it's because of something called the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union, and that has not got the geographical parameters that you might expect from the title. Australia is in it latterly as well. So the EBU, despite having the word Eurovision in it, is not Euro. That's it. It's that simple. They've always been there.
Okay. Forgive me for saying this. Am I correct to understand that this is another white man club?
I'd never thought of it like that.
Because if you talk about it...
Well, no, because I tell you what, I don't know. I don't know what the origins of that broadcasting union are, but I don't think they're likely to be colour-based. But I can't argue with you that all of the countries in it have probably got a white majority in them. But I'd be very surprised if that had anything to do with any of the reasoning ever, in any point.
Well, I'm trying to find the reasoning. I'm trying to find the logic. I'm not trying to be racist here.
No,
I'm trying to find the logic. That same thing happened with EuroLeague or UEFA. How is it that no other country outside Europe is allowed to play these events?
Well, the same reason that we're not in the Africa's Cup.
You're not.
Yeah.
You're not.
I know.
UK is not.
Exactly.
But Israel is in UEFA and EuroLeague. Why?
I don't know.
Please educate me if you find out.
I just said I don't know. How can I educate you if I don't know? You educate me if you want.
So but this is what I'm saying.
I'll find out. I'll tell you what. How often do you listen to the show?
As long as you want to before I go my Jummah prayers.
Okay. I mean, do you listen on Thursdays ever?
Yes, I do.
Well, ring into Mystery.
I've recently started listening to you.
You're very welcome here. Give a ring on Thursdays from 12 noon. I do something called Mystery Hour, where you can ring in with questions that you haven't been able to find an answer to, and somebody else listening will hopefully be able to.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. It's coming up to 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:47 is the time. I mean, listen, if it's the only thing you can do to register your horror and revulsion at what the administration led by Benjamin Netanyahu continue to visit upon Palestinians, and latterly, of course, Qatar and Iran, and then I guess you can make a pretty strong case for saying, Israel, you're not allowed in the Eurovision Song Contest this year. But you'll be welcomed back with open arms when you stop what you're currently doing. Whether it's a genocide or not is something that will be decided definitively by the International Criminal Court, but the list of organisations and experts who have already concluded that it is pretty long, and also, of course, includes some organisations from within Israel itself, some human rights organisations. Hundreds of members of the United Nations wrote a letter recently calling upon their leadership to declare Israel's offensive a genocide. Israel, meanwhile, continues to insist that it is a war of self-defence in Gaza, where I think 64,000 Palestinians have now been killed. But what does it actually appeal to? Does it appeal to a sort of almost a self-righteousness? Or does it actually have a purpose? Or does it not need to have a purpose to have a philosophical or a political heft? Your thoughts, please. 0345 6060 973. Adelia is in Prague, in the Czech Republic. Adelia, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
I'm actually very excited because I called so many times. This is the first time we're actually getting through.
Oh.
And I never thought this was going to be about Eurovision.
And here we are.
My stance is very simple. Is Russia currently participating in Eurovision? The answer is no. And I think Israel should not be participating either. Do I think it's going to make any difference? No, absolutely not. However, I personally feel that Western governments, especially ones supporting or recognizing genocide, or even the countries whose broadcasting services wrote in about excluding Israel from Eurovision, I actually believe that they should go further and enforce an airspace ban, because I'm a student in London, and I moved to the UK when I was 11, but I'm actually Russian.
Okay.
And as a Russian, I have to say that out of all things, the thing that actually made the most difference in terms of making lives difficult for Russian people is the airspace ban. I
don't want to. Yeah, I respect your position and your greater investment in that side of this conversation than I have, but I don't know. I don't know that it's a logical leap from talking about the Eurovision Song Contest, and I don't understand why everyone's so surprised to find themselves on the show talking about the Eurovision Song Contest to calling for a sort of international airspace ban. I understand why you've done it, and I suspect it was a point you would have made on a different phone in if you'd got on, and you want to get it onto this one because you feel so strongly about it, and I completely respect that. But I need to pick you up on one thing at least, which is a reference back to Israel's justification for continuing the action that has already left 64,000 Palestinians dead, the overwhelming majority of whom, as you know, are women and children. They continue to claim that is a war of self-defense. I don't think anybody in Russia claims that what they are doing is a war of self-defense. So you're possibly not. Well, I don't think you are comparing apples with apples.
I think that you are completely right. And the thing I wanted to say to preface my point is because obviously the nature of the October 7th attacks Russia is a complete aggressor in this whole situation.
Yes.
The thing with Gaza, there could be an argument made. But I think that at this point in time, we are so past that argument being made. And I think that at this point in time, the actions of Israel have crossed over the line to such an extent that that's no longer really an argument, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Let me read you something Paul has sent, I think while you've been talking, actually. He writes, "I love you, James, but," which is what you have to write if you want some criticism of the programme to actually get read out on it. He goes, and he's now putting in quotes the message that this sends to Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel and Spain and their respective national broadcasters. "You're mass killing children in Gaza, so you can't join in our music competition. Can you see how stupid that sounds? It's like kids in a playground." I don't think I agree with him, but I can see the point that he's making. It's as if this is a triviality that's being offered up in response to an atrocity.
Yeah, I also want to follow on from one of the things mentioned in the previous caller. If we don't want to go as far as the airspace ban, there are other methods that are more viscous than Eurovision ban.
Yes.
Like, for example, Russian athletes are not allowed to participate in Olympic Games unless they participate under the
independent
the
flag,
Olympics,
as it were.
Yeah,
Yes.
in the Olympics.
Same with Wimbledon, I think. Same with the tennis.
Yeah, so maybe that's the next step before the airspace ban. But I think the Eurovision thing still should be done because it's very nominal. Honestly, it's very just. But
yes,
still,
I do know. And you've expressed it. Thank you. Was it worth the wait to get on?
No, I'm so excited. It's so great.
Honestly.
I'm going to call again.
No, I look forward to it. I insist that you do. It's an order. You have to call again. It's compulsory.
I will.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Arabella. And I think Robert's comments chime with yours. I think they do. It's another little drop of shame, he writes, in the pool of the population's sense of identity. And despite Israel taking a stance of not caring about the world's opinions, shame can be very powerful. I don't know. What can you judge it by? How do you get a proper handle on what a population is feeling? Not from my inbox, that's for sure. But maybe if you read everything in it, you would get a slightly clearer picture of what public feeling might actually be. I'm going to have time, so 12:56. I can give Rosie in Nottingham about a minute and a half on this one. Are you going to use it wisely, Rosie?
I will do my best, James. Thank you very much for taking my call.
You're most
I've got
welcome.
quite a lot to get through.
Go on then, I'll be quiet.
In 2022, I'm not sure if you remember, after Russia invaded Ukraine, there was a massive, historic televote, a huge outpouring of support for Ukraine. The Israeli government is funding ads online to target people, lots of whom don't even watch the show, to put 20 votes in for Israel. This is making them win the televote in many, many countries. They're trying to buy the same...
I haven't. I think you're the third caller to allude to that, and it's not a story I'm across, and I probably need to be. But that aside, what would the boycott achieve?
It's all about soft power. I do have a couple of examples as well. The original lyrics and title for the 2024 entry from Israel were October Rain. That got rejected by the EBU. They were forced to change the lyrics. This is the same sort of thing that got Belarus banned in 2021. There is obviously vote rigging. This is the same thing that got Azerbaijan...
Again, I don't know about that. And this is probably my fault. I underestimated how febrile conversations about Eurovision can be, even when you're not adding to the mix the continuing carnage in Gaza. So I warned you I didn't have long, and I wasn't kidding, because I want you to listen to a little clip of my full disclosure interview this week with the star of The Fast Show and countless other magnificent entertainments, not to mention novels, Arabella Weir. She's an incredible woman, actually, and to be fair, she didn't have to come on full disclosure. I think that she was available because The Fast Show's going on tour. But I think the tickets for the Fast Show live tour sold out in about 24 minutes. So the idea that she needed to come and talk to me is clearly not true, which means she must have wanted to.
Dad once said about her, you mustn't pay any attention to her, darling. Rowing for your mother is like food and drink.
Yes.
It's just, and I do think my mother, and occasionally, I did put this in the show, she was literally on her deathbed. The hospital had said she was in hospital. They'd said, we found out what it is. It's not good news, blah, blah, blah. My mother was amazingly sanguine about it. She said, right, well, I've had a good life. Everybody has to die of something. Will there be any pain? And the doctor said, no, I think you're probably just, an organ will fail and you'll just go to sleep. She said, right, okay, can I have a glass of champagne? And the guy said, no, I don't think that'd be a good idea. And he said, I'm not sure it would go down. And she said, all right, fine. And then he said, we can do an operation. And to her eternal credit, because she was a socialist, she said, well, she really was a champagne socialist. She said, no point in draining the NHS just for a couple of extra weeks. And then, anyway, so I went in to see her in these remaining days, and it was a bank holiday, and I thought I'd treat myself because it was all so miserable. And I had a coronation chicken sandwich from Pret a Manger. And I sat there, of her 4 children, I'm the only one there. And she says, oh, God, darling, have you any idea how fattening mayonnaise is? And I went, Mum, are we really going to do this in your last remaining days? And she said, no, but look at you, great fat thing chomping through that sandwich.
Fucking hell.
I know, and I just went, Mum, come on, let's not fucking do this. You're going to be dead soon. She said, yes, but I can't bear the idea that you're going to carry on eating that. And
how old were you?
I don't know, 52 or something. Whenever she died, I guess about 52. I just remember thinking, she really is going to go out fighting. But I managed to make it into one of the best gags in that show.
It's almost impressive in that kind of...
Her commitment to being withering.
Oh, dear. You'll enjoy that interview. I hadn't met Arabella before, but I'm very glad I have now. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player and, of course, the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on all the top stories and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you want. You can pause and rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts. So download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4 on LBC, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.